The time is now 5:30, and we will call to order the regular board meeting for April the 19th of the Board of Trustees. The first item on the agenda is a moment of silence, so please stand with me, and we will follow that with the pledge to the U.S. and the Texas flags. Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is presentations, recognitions, and awards. And tonight we are excited to recognize one of our own, our CFO, and it's for TASBO recognition. And we have Tracy Ginsburg, who is the Executive Director of TASBO, here to announce the award. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you tonight. My name is Tracy Ginsburg, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Texas Association of School Business Officials. And it's an absolute honor and privilege to work with your finance and operations teams through our organization. And before I recognize Daryl, if I may, I'd love to recognize Haiti Pena. She is Midland is one of only 54 districts in the state who have received a Purchasing Award of Merit. And Haiti is particularly a blessing. We've asked her to actually join our team and be part of the awards recognition process and kind of help score and train other up-and-coming purchasing officials. So I apologize that wasn't on the agenda, but since I'm here, I hate not to tell you that Haiti's doing great things as well.
Absolutely appreciate that. Thank you.
But these past, 8-9 years, I've had the privilege of Daryl serving as a board member on our board. And this past year, he was the president. And my role here tonight is mainly to thank you for sharing Daryl with TASBO. His leadership is unparalleled. He's a very recognized and respected leader across the state. The Daryl I know is a man of few words, but when he speaks, people listen. And he has been a terrific leader for TASBO, and I'm so pleased that you allowed him to serve this past year, and he's winding down this year as past president. And I just want to thank you for allowing him to be away from the district, but more so to allow him to share his leadership with other school officials across the state. Want to say anything?
Yeah,
You're
I
a man
can't
of
get
few
away.
words.
Yes, I know, and I started cringe when she says a man of few words because y'all know differently. But thank you, Tracy, for this presentation. And there's always special things that goes out because not only do you have to say thank you to my wife for her support and my son for their support, but also all the staff that has to kind of take up the slack when you're gone. And thank you for the finance team and everybody else that has supported me in this. And also thank you to the district for allowing me to be there, and Dr. Ramsey for her going to the conference. And I will tell you, I forgot to put this on her calendar, so she had to make crazy changes and take crazy flights to get there, and thank you for your support also. Thank y'all.
Daryl, if we can have you come up, we're going to take a photo with the board.
And while we're all coming up here, is Ms. Pena, are you here in your department? Would you please rise so we can recognize you guys too? Thank you, Mr. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public forum, and we have several tonight, and, I'm sorry, excuse me, we have 2B, School Library Monthly Proclamation. And so we definitely want to recognize our librarians this month and all the work that they do in our school board, in our schools each day. And so we have a proclamation that we want to recognize the librarians, and I will read it for you. Whereas April 2022 has been designated the 37th Annual National School Library Month, and whereas school libraries provide materials for teachers and students that will encourage growth and knowledge, and whereas school libraries provide materials that will develop literary, cultural, aesthetic appreciation, and ethical standards, and whereas school libraries provide materials which reflect the ideas and beliefs of religious, social, political, historical, and ethnic groups and their contributions to the American and world heritage and culture. And whereas school libraries provide books to encourage children to read for pleasure, and whereas school libraries provide materials to meet individual needs, varied interests, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and maturity levels of the students served, and whereas school libraries are a fun place for students to go and all students deserve a well-managed library to provide for free expression and access to ideas. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Midland ISD Board of Education and the Midland ISD Superintendent of Schools declare the month of April 2022 as School Library Month. In addition to that, we do appreciate our librarians, but we also have lots of others we need to recognize this month. So in addition to School Library Month, we have, and School Librarian Appreciation Day, April 4th through 8th was Assistant Principal Week. April 6th was Paraprofessional Appreciation Day. April 18th through 22nd is Volunteer Appreciation Recognition Week. And last but not least, April 27th is Administrative Professionals Day. And I'm not sure if Veronica stayed in here or if she disappeared on us, but I will tell you that things do not get done at MISD without Veronica Ramirez. And so we are very appreciative of her and how she takes care of our superintendent and all the school board members. We appreciate all these groups that come together to serve our students. So thank all of you for that as well. Okay, now item 3 is public forum. The time is 5:39. And I've got a few speakers that are going to speak here first, and we'll go there. And then there's some that are going to want to speak as their topic comes up on the agenda. And then we have one that we will push just toward the consent agenda just to see if we have anything pulled from consent. So the first speaker is Brandon Hodges. And Mr. Hodges actually has 2 topics. He's going to divide his time. His first topic will be integrity, and then he will come back during the long-range planning discussion and add to his comments then. Welcome, Mr. Hodges.
Good evening, Board. I would like to speak to you today about a subject that is of paramount concern, the education of our Midland students. We are a people who believe that each generation will stand on the shoulders of the ones before it, the accomplishment of each generation greater than the last. We have experienced academic learning challenges for the past several decades, and our learning loss was compounded by the coronavirus. This board took notice of our academic challenges and sought and approved solutions for turning around MISD academically. One of the tools sought and approved by this board is in-district partnerships. I would like to thank the board for these opportunities that have yielded positive improvements for our most underserved students. It has been stated numerous times that adult behavior must change to improve student outcomes. These outside-the-box solutions are proof that this board is focused on student outcomes by offering choice to parents and students. We're grateful that the board is considering extending the Idea Travis to 8th grade and look forward to seeing Idea Travis operating fully with the extension of 9th through 12th. Idea Travis has improved student outcomes, and since being an MISD school, we all get to celebrate that achievement. Later this evening, the board will be presented the Long Range Facilities Committee recommendation. This was worked on for many hours and still leaves some questions regarding the long-term outlook for MISD. But we believe these questions were not within the scope of the Long Range Facilities Committee. What was always considered is the impact all schools will have on MISD capacity needs. Thus the reason there were discussions on partnerships along with other non-MISD schools about changing the capacity needs of our recommendation. If we change the scope of our partners, will we be changing the scope, needs, and costs of the Long Range Facilities Committee recommendation? With increasing the cost of the Long Range Facilities Committee's recommendation, we will also be increasing the burden on Midland taxpayers. Extending Idea Travis allows Idea to build a standalone college prep facility, 9th through 12th, at zero cost to MISD or to Midland taxpayers. It is important that we look at the community at Broad and make sure we are serving all students, just like we did at Young Women's Leadership Academy. This board voted to dislocate an entire student population to make sure Young Women's Leadership Academy was given their own campus. We should now offer our own in-district partner an opportunity for success. Equitability being a pillar for this board, we should make sure that we're offering opportunity and choice to all students. I hope you extend Idea Travis with 8th grade this evening and will soon approve their 9th through 12th grade extension. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges, you only allowed 11 seconds left. Or did you say all you wanted to say, or do you want to come back for your 11 seconds?
I'm going to come back for the rock example.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next speaker we have tonight is Heidi Kirk, and she has chosen to speak on English 1 and 2 interim testing. Welcome, Ms. Kirk.
Good evening, Superintendent Ramsey, Board. I just wanted to come, I wanted to come the last board meeting, but I was taking part in an action research project and wasn't able to attend. About 6 weeks ago now, we were told that we were going to have to provide an interim test to our students for English 1 and 2, 2 weeks before we actually gave our test, where we weren't going to be able to get any data or anything like that back. Teachers spoke up to Mr. Charlie Garcia and to our principal, Candace Warren, and to Claudia Valenzuela, one of the directors, and they listened. They were able to advocate on our behalf, and no one in the district had to provide the English 1 or 2 interim test because just of the timing. And they've also committed to planning for next year so that we can still give that test and get that data back to help our students improve and prepare for the STAR, which is required for graduation. But I just wanted to say thank you to them for advocating on our behalf, because as a teacher who comes here, and I hear a lot, adult behaviors have to change before student behaviors will change. And in the end, we do the right thing for kids. It was an example of some of our new leadership doing what was best for kids. And it was very exciting to see. Has not always been the norm, so I'm excited about those things to come. And I just want to really, again, say thank you for listening to what we had to say and fighting for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirk. The next speaker we have is Isaac Garnett, and Mr. Garnett will speak on item 7F, well, 7G, employee stipend.
Thank you and good evening. I just want to make 2 quick points. And Mr. Booker, would you share with the public what you shared with me regarding the up to $2,000 clarification? Or could someone share that?
Yes, so.
Thank you, sir. That's
the
all.
up to was included because not all employees will be receiving the full 2,000. It'll be based on a criteria of when you started during the year. But if you work the entire full year and you're a full-time employee, you will get the $2,000. And that's across the board for all of our staff, including teachers, administrators, custodial.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. You had already clarified that to me, and I know the public was interested in that as well. One other point that I wanted to make is that I know that the school district and the administrative staff doing a tremendous job. But what I do want to say regarding the incentive program, the City of Midland partnered with Midland Memorial Hospital to fund a similar incentive program. The hospital took the initiative to show leadership and self-sacrifice to exempt executive staff from the incentive program. And I think that would be an awesome move by this administrative staff to do the same. Not that you're not worthy, but it shows tremendous leadership and self-sacrifice, and I think it would be something that would really go a long way, similar to what the hospital district, to show that we are with our working class and working folks who are part of a school district. Just as a consideration, please consider that, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garnett. The next speaker we have signed up tonight is Grant Billingsley, and he chooses to speak on item 7F, Idea Travis. Welcome, Mr. Billingsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Murray, trustees, Superintendent Ramsey, thank you for letting me be here. My name is Grant Billingsley. I'm President and CEO of the Scarborough Foundation, and tonight my remarks are on behalf of the Board of Directors of our organization. I'm here tonight to encourage you to do 2 things. One, first, we encourage you to authorize the expansion of in-district charter partner idea Travis to include 8th grade as part of your agenda tonight. And second, we want to strongly encourage you in the next 45 to 60 days to also authorize Idea Travis to expand to include grades 9 through 12. I've spoken to some of you about this topic, but I wanted Scarborough Foundation to be on the record with all of you. So I'm here tonight and won't take up a lot of your time. I want to thank and commend you, along with Superintendent Ramsey and all of you, for what you're doing to execute on the guidance of the System of Great Schools. Some of you were there. I sat through the System of Great School training, and I remember learning that we all need to put student achievement first, far above adult convenience and other considerations. And I commend you on the things that you're doing. It's evident in the district, and I thank you for doing those things. There is good work being done at Idea Travis, which is a far cry from the troubles that made Travis Elementary one of the worst schools in the state not too many years ago. One data point jumps out to me when I try to understand where Travis Elementary was a few years ago, and the data point is this, that in 2019, before Idea Travis came along, only 8% of Travis third graders were reading on meeting standard on reading level in the STAR test, 8%. The thing that concerns me about that is the unspoken part of that is that means 92 out of 100 kids were not meeting standard, that were falling short, that were already having trouble reading. And I know that you know that someone who has trouble reading is not going to do well at math. They're going to have problems with math. They're going to have a lot of problems with history, social studies, whatever it is. They know they're going to have problems going forward. And I ask you to keep that in mind as you evaluate how your in-district partners and all your schools are evaluating, as you keep in mind where Travis started, Idea Travis started when they began. Something else I would ask you to consider as you think about the possibility of expanding Idea Travis beyond 8th grade, that is that there are nearly 750 students right now on a wait list for Idea Travis. That is a lot of students for a school that has about 1,000 seats. And I want to ask you to remember those engaged parents, because I'm thinking most of those students don't go online and submit those applications. Those are engaged parents that want their students to go to a school that not too long ago was one of the worst schools in the state. So last thing I want to say is, you've heard it already, but as you talk later about adding capacity that are desperately needed to our district in the secondary schools, please consider what could happen by idea building 500 seats of secondary schools to go forward. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Billingsley. Our next speaker is Nicodemus Martinez, and he too will speak on Idea Travis, item 7F. Welcome.
Apologize about that. I took the furthest seat in the building. All right. Evening, everyone, board member, superintendent, and local constituents. My name is Nicodemus Martinez. I'm a lifelong Texan. I was born and raised in San Antonio, and I moved out to Midland 2 years ago at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. While my story is far from unique, its sameness is what is quite special. I currently live with 2 teachers, one of which was born in Georgia, and the other is also a Texan. We all work at Travis. We all have currently met wonderful friends, now colleagues, who similarly moved out from their homes, New Jersey, Tennessee, Missouri, to name a few. And what feels like every inch of Texas is covered, colleagues have joined to come work in Midland at Idea Travis. I've met teachers who have been residents of Midland for years, faculty members, residents of Midland for years who choose to work at Idea Travis. Our commonality of working at Travis simply surrounds a decision we all made. Each and every single employee at Idea Travis decided, yes, I want to work there. You all know working in education is not always the most glamorous, but we can attest it is indeed fulfilling. And I know I do not speak out of turn regarding my colleagues. We all have selected this line of work to create lifelong change for families, and this work will continue to be done at Travis. Similarly to everyone who makes the choice to work here, our families make a choice. 462 students have chosen Idea Travis as the school they would like to attend, their school of choice. Furthermore, 491 families who are zoned to Travis Elementary have chosen to continue their education at Travis. These families similarly made a choice. I say choice tonight a lot, because tonight an important choice will be made. And it will be made in regarding the continuance of another grade level at Idea Travis, the addition of an 8th grade. As an assistant principal at Idea Travis, I made the right choice. Our families made the right choice. We all made the right choice. I implore you, the MISD Board of Directors, to also make the right choice. I stand in full support of adding another grade level, the 8th grade, to Idea Travis for the upcoming school year and additional grade levels as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Our next speaker that signed up is Monica Hernandez, and she will also speak on 8th grade expansion of Idea Travis. Welcome back.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Ramsey. I appreciate you having me here today. Many of you probably remember me from my position both at Central Office and within Days of Alla Elementary. I am so honored to be back here today to speak to you guys. When I'm coming up to you guys and talking to you, I feel like I bring a very unique perspective that not many others have. And tonight, as you make an important decision about Idea Travis's expansion to 8th grade, I want to share that I have had the wonderful opportunity to work both at MISD and at Idea Travis. My own kids attend Bowie Fine Arts Academy. I watched a play just last week on this very, very stage. In addition, I was born and raised in Midland. So Midland is my community. My heart is here. My heart is with every single child in Midland. Midland ISD, Travis Elementary as well. So What I'm about to tell you is a story of whenever I first went over to Travis, and it's a heartbreaking story. The summer before I joined Travis, I was asked to go and help test kids and to see if we could figure out what their reading levels were. And as I was testing second graders, all they could read to me, and these words were easy, it was like, the car went down the road. And the second graders were going T-H-E. It broke my heart. Now, one thing that I realized as being a part of Idea Travis, working with these second graders, is how much we work to ensure that students are growing on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. Our leadership team is adamant about working together and talking about kids every single week about what they are going to do, not next week, but this week, to ensure that those students make growth. By the end of the school year, 70% of those students ended up reading on grade level. We started out with only 4 kids. This school year, I've had the opportunity to work with the middle school scholars, so 6th and 7th grade scholars. And I want to tell you just a little bit about them and their growth. When they started out with us as 5th graders, their math level was at a 4.0. Just recently, we looked at their math levels. They are now at 8.3, an average of an 8.3. That's 4.3 years of growth within a very little span of time. So tonight, you have a very, very important decision. And by saying yes to the expansion to 8th grade, you're saying yes to those kids that I have really come to love and cherish. Their life trajectories are literally changing, and I hope you make the right decision. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment to all of the kids in Midland.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. The last 2 speakers have chosen to speak on agenda items at that time, so I will move now to agenda item 4, consent agenda. Item 4A, board meeting minutes. Item 4B, monthly financials. Item 4C, contracts over $100,000. Item 4D, quarterly investment report. Item 4E, budget amendment. Item 4F, request for proposal, RFP number 20-56, Addendum 3, Food Service Management Company, option to extend. Option 4G, personnel appointments. Item 4H, virtual hybrid school plan, TEA application, Coleman High School. And item 4I, TEAC certification 2022-2023. Board, is there any reason any of these items should be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, before we approve, we have a speaker, Patrick Byrne, and I hope I said that right, that would like to speak on the 4F RFP food service, and welcome.
Mr. President, Superintendent, board members, thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Patrick Byrne. I run a company called Sarah Farms. We served you with milk. We are a farming-based company. We farm dairy cows up in the Panhandle, have a milk processing plant in El Paso. We came to we served MISD since 2010. Then we lowered your cost. We served you when Gandy's failed to serve you. We served you when they had quality issues. We served you during COVID when it was not profitable for us. Last year, without notice, we were told you were moving to a food service company, which is fine. We understand. We all had employee issues. We understand why you made the decision. But what I don't understand is why they will not allow local companies to bid. We've tried time and time again with the local leadership here, with the food service management company, and been referred to a Canadian parent company who won't even take our calls. MISD is now paying more than Ector County. So this is bad for competition, it's bad for small business. I'd like to introduce, stand up please. This is David Lopez on your right. He's worked for us. He came out here when we started your business, worked for you for 12 years. When we came in here, the maintenance guys knew him because he would come in the weekend and fix coolers. And this is his son, David, who just returned from the Army, who's now working with our company. These are the people that is hurting. We'd like you to ask, we don't want to be given the business, but open it up for bid. You know, sitting in your lobby tonight, I was talking to one of your employees, they said, you know, the kids don't like the milk, they're spitting it out. And you're having issues, and we would just like a chance. You know, before you approve this, we'd ask if you could open it up to local companies instead of go to a national bid. We farm in Texas. We like to do business with Texas school districts. We do a lot from El Paso to San Angelo. We'd like to just be included in the bid. We'd rather do that than deal with a foreign country and deal with someone in Canada. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes. So, okay, so we're going to pull item 4F. Ms. Spencer, could you come to the microphone, please?
Good evening. I may need Haiti Pena's help with this as well, depending upon the question.
Okay, so can you speak to the process that we arrived at the recommendation as Chartwells and how we handle specifically something like a milk purchasing? And I know that that's specific to what he spoke about, but also just generally what the feedback has been on food with our new partnership, how we handle the different specifics of, and are we allowing local farmers and providers to bid?
Sure. So last school year, the district put out an RFP, request for proposals for food service management companies, which was open to nationwide proposals. We did have several companies respond to that and went through the evaluation process and ultimately selected Chartwells, who entered the district in July of this school year and has been providing child nutrition services for the students and staff, if they choose, from August now until where we are right now. All feedback, or the majority of feedback, I won't say all, has been positive. Participation is up. More students are eating now than have eaten in the past. There have been some supply chain issues with menu items, and we've had to switch some things out, and we've addressed those. TDA has addressed that through the USDA as well, and providing additional grant funding to support that and making sure that we're able to provide the food to students that we need. Chartwells does procure their food. Haiti, as well as TDA, make sure that appropriate procurement processes are followed. I cannot speak to milk specifically. Haiti may be able to do that.
Good evening, Board. Good evening, Superintendent and Mr. Pounds. Right now, currently, Chartwells is in charge of procuring all of food, milk supplies. Part of the TDA guidelines does say that they're supposed to put out a bid and make it available to everyone. Now with Chartwells, we could go ahead and open lines of communications with them to ensure that they're doing that. So I will go ahead and take Mr. Burns' card to make sure that he knows where to go and bid for those items.
Okay. Opportunity
Yes.
for local farmers and vendors, food suppliers to work with Chartwells within their parameter as a subcontractor. Is
Yes,
that what you're
ma'am.
saying?
So right now, currently, Chartwells does all the procurement. They have to follow out all guidelines like the school district would. At that point, they would invite all vendors. We will ask them to specifically include Sarah Farms milk to make sure that they have an opportunity to bid on local items.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. So just from a logistical time-wise standpoint, we're approving Chartwell as the overall, and then at some point they go out for bid to the subcontractors for milk, for meals, for dessert, whatever the case may be. So this approval tonight does not prohibit someone like Sarah Farms still receiving work through MISD.
That is correct.
Who's the current milk provider?
I don't have that information. I would have to get with Chartwells to see who is the current milk bid with them.
So I guess a question I ask, maybe Mr. Byrne, or maybe you all can answer it. So is there an opportunity for, maybe I missed it, so is there an opportunity for him to get with Chartwell, I guess, to maybe give a proposal for a bid on the milk, or is it something that Chartwell, they go out to different vendors that have milk to send out proposals for them to receive a bid on what their milk product may cost versus what Mr. Byrne is offering as far as this product of milk?
Yes, Chartwell is obligated to go ahead and follow the same guidelines as us. So when they put out a proposal, they have to make it available to everyone, to local vendors, our local vendors, and also national vendors, because we do pay those funds are federal, so they have to make it open to everyone.
Okay, so in the past before Chartwell came in, we would submit our RFQs out to Mr. Byrne, to where he could actually submit a bid into the school system to where we could purchase milk from him individually versus us doing the total bid out to Chartwell. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Or published, yes.
Yes, we would publish an RFP for milk, for the milk and dairy products, and everybody was able to go ahead and bid, and we would go ahead and contract with them. At this point, Chartwell's is the one that does all the bidding for all the food items.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry. Is that okay? Just one more quick question. Just to be clear, we did go through the RFP process of option to extend. So we did have 3 companies that we were considering before the recommendation came down as Chartwell's again, as option A. Is that correct? It was Compass, Sodexo, and Southwest Food Service?
So those were the companies that responded last school year. And so what
we didn't revisit
No.
it?
So what TDA allows is that once you put out the RFP, you have the option to extend that contract 5 times before you go out for bid again. It does not obligate you to do so 5 times, but if things are progressing in a manner that you believe is productive, and in order to continue to progress, they allow you to extend. What they have changed is that all of the documents must be completed and submitted to TDA prior to board approval, so that TDA can ensure that all processes and procedures have been appropriately followed. And we did submit all documentation, and TDA has approved the extension of the contract.
But if we were not to approve tonight, what would happen?
Well, if we were not to approve tonight, we would miss all of the TDA deadlines, and we would be in danger of not being able to provide appropriate food services on the first day of the 22-23 school year.
Okay.
I'll move. We have a motion for item 4F. We have a second? Second from Mr. Davis. Any further discussion? Mr. Triscetti.
Just as a clarification, Kelly, Ms. Spencer, you said that since Chartwell came on, food lunch service is up numbers-wise. Did I hear you correctly?
The participation of students who are eating lunch every day has increased. We did not compare that to last school year because,
Sure.
But our last regular normal school year participation has
So
increased.
I may be connecting dots that aren't there, and this is speculative in nature, Dr. Ramsey, but how much of that is tied to the federal government subsidy where all meals are free, and so people are just going and eat? I mean, there may not be a way to disseminate that.
So certainly it would be difficult to say why there is more participation than previous years because of that particular funding. But I'm in cafeterias, I talk to students that are eating, and the feedback from students is positive.
But it's not because we're necessarily serving steak and potato and the food is infinitely better. There could be other factors there.
Correct.
All right.
I guess one other question, if I may. So are the options that we talked about when we first entered into contract with Chartwell, do the students still have options as far as the meals, other than just having one meal, to where they have a selection of foods where the parent can actually go online and select the meal that?
Yes, sir. So depending upon the grade span, the choices increase. So elementary campuses have fewer choices than secondary campuses, but menus are published and there are online options as well. So families can see the nutritional value of each meal. And then there's some great things happening. Student choice is one of my favorites, where the chefs, we do have now on-site chefs, and they go to campuses and prepare meals and allow students, whether they're eating in the cafeteria that day or not, to sample and then vote on what they prefer, and then those items are added to the menu. And so we're seeing constant changes in variety in the things that are being provided, and then demonstrations being offered at elementary campuses in Discovery Kitchens, where students are having the opportunity to learn how to prepare easy, nutritious meals at home as well. And then another one of my favorites is Mood Boost at elementary schools as well, that is teaching students as they come through the line to make good choices and how those choices and those foods can affect how they're feeling.
Okay. Mr. Murray, may I ask Mr. Byrne a question?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
You made a statement that there was money being saved from Ector County with your product versus what we're getting. How so?
Yeah, your current price of milk is higher than Ector County because they just released a bid, and it's significantly lower. And I just wanted to comment that while Chartwell's does put it out for bid, they will only take national bids. So that means I would have to bid from Texas to give them a price in Pennsylvania or San Francisco, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
We've been on the bench a year. We just want another shot at it. We love serving you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Board, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Going back to the consent item, items 4A through E were deemed approved by consent, and items G through I were deemed approved by consent. The next item is agenda item is number 5, district presentations, and the first one is long-range planning committee presentation. And I want to invite Mr. Hodges back to conclude his remarks before Ms. Spencer's presentation.
I sat on the Long Range Facilities Committee, and we did a lot of really good work and hard work on it. But I just wanted to remind the committee, and I talked to Kelly earlier, just wanted to make it public record. Some of the math is a little bit incorrect, so I'll show you on it. But if you look at slide 10 in the presentation and look at the percentages on slide 14, you'll see that math doesn't add up. And I don't believe we've ever seen an 8.6% student population increase in Midland, but I'm not sure. And we all need to come up with the same baseline for the facilities committee. That way we'll all know the exact same numbers, and it seems like we can't get the baselines right with the numbers. So I think it's important. Just wanted to make y'all aware of it as y'all see the presentation today. Pay attention to slide 10 and 14.
10 and 14? Is that what you said, Hodges?
10 and 14.
10 and 14?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Sorry,
you,
I
Ms.
didn't hear
Hodges. Ms. Spencer?
Good evening again, President Murray, Trustees, Superintendent Ramsey. This evening you will hear from 4 members of the Long Range Planning Committee.
I'm sorry, can you adjust your microphone just a second?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I can hear you better there.
My teacher voice is not working
I'm
tonight.
getting old, so I can't hear well.
So this evening, you'll hear from 4 members of the Long Range Planning Committee, Whitney Groves, Sheryl Peckham, R.J. Lopez, and John Wilkes, who, along with other members of the committee, many of who are here tonight, dedicated their time and energy over the last 8 months to long-range facility planning for the students and staff of Midland ISD and the community of Midland. Tonight's presentation that they will give provides insight into their work and offers recommendations for the future of Midland ISD. And just to address Mr. Hodges' comments, who was in fact a member of the committee, the point of contention on slide 10, I've asked Huckabee to look into that particular number to make sure that it is correct, and if it needs revision, it will be changed prior to, and that's the student growth number. It'll be changed prior to any type of formal publication. And then on slide 14, the first row, I believe, is based on the demographic data that was conducted by Davis Demographics and the information that we heard in September from them. And then the other is merely projections based on that information that Huckabee calculated at the request of the committee. And so, as I've mentioned before, we are now getting ourselves on a cycle where our demographic data will be updated more routinely. So that way, we're always making facility decisions based on the most current information, enrollment, and then predictions and forecasts. So without further ado, I welcome first Ms. Peckham and the other members of the committee.
Hi, my name is Sheryl Peckham. I volunteered on this committee because I saw a need for people in our community to come together to identify solutions for our aging facilities and growing community. I'm an educator and a parent, and I have 2 children who attend this great school, Bowie Fine Arts Academy. Can't hear me?
Yeah, I was going to say, we could put
Gotcha.
this
Is this better?
yeah, maybe a little closer.
Okay.
I can, like I said, I'm getting old, so.
That's okay. And I believe that facilities set the stage for learning. The items for discussion are essentially the table of contents and represent a broad categorization of all of the topics we discussed. While the final recommendations focus mainly on facility improvements, we talked about things like student experiences, safety and security, and the impact on our community that improvements to our schools can have. We wanted there to be a why behind our recommendation. We started our committee meetings with discussions about broad goals for both the district and the committee itself. We asked questions like, what elements of Midland ISD would we like to leave behind as we make plans for the future? And we asked, what elements of Midland ISD would we like to carry into the future? We also talked about the learning experiences of our students. We asked, what experiences do we think students need to be academically prepared? We discussed many topics, such as real-life experiences, financial literacy, and giving students choices. We then asked, if these are the experiences our students need to have in our schools, what building elements have the greatest impact on student learning and public perception of our schools? These questions were also posed to a group of principals and PTA members. Here you can see how the individual grades of the building elements rank against each other. You can see that utilities, space, and technology had the largest impact for all 3 groups. Note that on a scale of 1 to 5, the lowest grade is a 3.3. Those involved feel that the building elements will have a positive impact on both learning and the public perception of our schools. In tandem with the Long Range Planning Committee, the Safety and Security group was doing similar grading exercises about safety and security. And we've included their input as part of the considerations we gave to the Long Range Plan. The list of considerations for safety and security was developed by a group of principals and divided into 2 categories: facility considerations and operational considerations. The items that you see here in green for facility considerations were considered strongly recommended to be implemented into the long-range plan. And here you have operational considerations.
Hello, Board and Superintendent Ramsey. My name is RJ Lopez, and I have a 6-year-old son that attends kindergarten at Emerson Elementary. And since I have your undivided attention, I'd like to brag on his teacher, Casey McDuffie. She was a brand new kindergarten teacher, so of course I was a little worried when I sent my kind of ahead of the curve son to kindergarten under her supervision. But it wasn't long till I realized she was providing amazing personalized learning just for him. I mean, she was giving him worksheets that were beyond what some of the other students were doing. And about halfway through the semester, she was excited to partner him with first grade teachers so that he could be reading with the first graders, which was more on his level. And so it just, it thrilled me, and more importantly, it thrilled my son to be doing that. And now he's excited to go to Carver next semester, and I mean, it was all made possible because of you guys, because of Emerson, and because of, Casey McDuffie, his teacher. And so I want to say thank you to all of you for that opportunity. And we went through this process to be able to support, the Casey McDuffies out there. And I really hope that this plan that we came up with empowers them to thrive. All right, let's see. So, looking at the campuses, they're already 33% at capacity, and that's 2020 numbers. We also looked at the impact over the next 10 years and the fact that 58% of the campuses will be over capacity. And regardless of the percentage growth rate that you use on any given slide, we know that we're growing and we know that we're at capacity. Some of the other information we looked at was just obviously the fact that we have 25,000 students in 41 campuses that are continuing to grow. Those include our pre-K through 6th elementaries, our 7th through 8th middle schools, 9th grade freshman campuses, and the 10th through 12th grade high schools. Another metric that we used during the planning was the adjacent or similar districts, trying to see what they're up to, how they've tackled some of the growth, how they've been able to thrive with similar demographics and similar students. You can see just some of the example districts that we looked at. At the same time of looking at similar districts and some of our numbers, we also looked at some of the aging conditions of the existing campuses with some of the cost associated with upgrading those facilities in each one of these categories from the facility assessment. There's a note on the side that talks about some of the improvements that are currently being undergone, which was discussed a lot during the facility committee meetings. Just the fact that you've already started tackling some of these issues and addressing some of the HVAC replacements where we had students in locker rooms that didn't have air conditioners. So I think when we first started, it was like, gosh, there's so many key things that need to be done. Where do we start? But it seems like y'all have already started it. So that was really exciting for us to hear. And the fact that you only had 3 roofs that were older than 8 years old, I think was really great to hear. Obviously, there's a ton of information we were going through, but these were some of the things that we discussed over time, which is just the history and identity of schools. And when you talk about 2 versus 3 high schools. The conversation we've been having for decades now, I guess it seems, but we really wanted to consider that impact on the community, on the students, on the teachers. Same thing with the CTE options, whether there's a centralized CTE or separate facilities at each high school. We discussed quite a bit in how that can impact the community. Another factor was just the current capacities at the high school level and how growth could impact those going in a 2 high school versus 3 high school direction. We discussed the potential for greater operational efficiency of 2 high schools and also the community support for 2 high schools versus the cons of additional staffing with 3 high schools. And then lastly, for my part at least, we started looking at the geographical implications of what these realignments might look like. And so you can see we looked at the available land as shown in red on the map. And then we just asked, when new high schools are built, what happens to the existing facilities? Because I know that's it's a big question. You can't just take them out and abandon them. So we want to make sure that we really study some of those options for some of those buildings that we'd be transitioning. And lastly, we started showing where we would recommend the new Legacy High School, the new Midland High School, and some of the middle schools to be placed. And I think you'll see in the next few slides, we've left some of those options for further investigation because there's still some information that we would like to receive before moving forward on those parts. But thank you all for having me.
Good evening, Dr. Ramsey, school board members, community members. My name is John Wilkes. It is my joy and privilege to serve as the department chair for social studies at San Jacinto Junior High School. My wife, Lori, teaches life skills at Scarborough Elementary. My youngest daughter, Amelia, is a fifth grader at Carver. My son, Ian, is a seventh grader at Abel. My daughter, Abigail, is a freshman at Legacy Freshman High School. And my firstborn son, after struggling as a student all through, as of last month, is a proud graduate of Coleman High School. Additionally, my mother, Rita, served as a paraprofessional at Burnett Elementary, watching students during all of the years that we had the cluster system get on and off buses and wait. She can't walk through HEB without somebody stopping Miss Rita to talk. She and my father served on the PTA and put on, I'm biased, but the best Halloween carnivals the west side of Midland has ever seen at Burnett. And my father cooked more gallons of chili for chili supper to raise money for our bands than I can possibly calculate. All of that is to say, I am here because I love this district. And forgive me for being emotional, but it is emotional to me. I am here because people like Mr. Maurer at Fannin, my English teacher, Miss Yarborough, my math teacher at South, Coach Wilson, my Texas history teacher at Alamo, Mr. Scott, the band director for many, many years at Midland Freshman, and the great Hugh Franks, who this beard is largely inspired by, who taught me economics at Midland High School. And when I changed careers at the age of 38 and got into education, it was such a joy to come home and do this work here. And my first thought in getting to know the district that shaped me was looking around at all of our campuses and thinking, wow, nothing's changed since I graduated in 1993. And then that thought hit again a little less enthusiastically. Wow, nothing's really changed since 1993. And I think I'm standing here because I want to make sure that should any of my kids someday teach in this district, and I have two that are thinking about it, that they won't say that. So, with that said, I'd like to move on to some of the big picture items that we're addressing. As previously talked about, throughout our process, we kept in mind the educational experience. That was the burning issue for us. Safety and security, future growth within our community, the aging conditions of our campuses, and community support. I would like to walk through some conceptual guidelines before we follow up with some actual brick and mortar suggestions. So to begin with, to talk about where we think educationally we need to get and the model. So number one, to maintain two comprehensive high schools with grade alignments going 9 through 12. In previous suggestions, this has come out, and I think for the board and the community, the benefits of moving freshmen into the same building with the other grades is pretty evident. Anybody in here who has a freshman that buses back and forth to the high school, we know that's not a great experience. Number two is moving sixth grade into the middle school. Now, we've talked about this before, but the board, no doubt, is aware of some changes that the community may not be. TEA has recently published new science TEKs where the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade courses will build directly on top of each other. Just breaking in the last few weeks, their proposal for social studies will essentially create a single 3-year course of U.S. and Texas history going 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Speaking as a junior high teacher, let me tell you that our odds of success on the new science and social studies TEKs will be infinitely higher if we are able to house all 3 grade levels in the same building so that our professional learning communities can collaborate to make sure that we are putting the right emphasis on the same areas so our kids are getting a smooth transition year to year. Now, presently, this doesn't have any implications for our accountability, but it stands to reason that once TEA finalizes both of these TEKs, we can expect the legislature to take that into consideration for future testing years. So not only is this a matter of practical concern as teachers, we want to have those kids under our roof all 3 years to give them a consistent education in science and social studies for their sake. We do believe that that will come with accountability consequences as STAR is realigned to fit with the new TEKs that are already coming in science and will be soon to follow in social studies. And then finally, thinking about moving 6th grade off of our elementary campuses frees up space both for future growth and in the event that legislative action in the future possibly could expand pre-K, something that we know has come up in front of the state legislature the last several biennium. So for those reasons, we are recommending that realignment, that we would have 2 comprehensive high schools, and that we would convert our freshman centers into 2, well, not necessarily both of them, but we'll get there in a minute, but that we would have 6 middle schools. Sorry, I misspoke. Also, that raises the issue of what to do with our current Legacy High School and our current Midland freshman campuses and the possibility of using those to be our 5th and 6th middle school. Thinking through the CTE issue, one of the things we wrestled with in thinking about comprehensive high schools is how do we address the needs for robust CTE? So going through all of our planning, we realized that this is extremely important, that if our mission is both college and career, and we want our students to have those robust opportunities, that there's a lot of things to take into account. However, we didn't want to make a total recommendation on that on our own because there are a number of factors. of how best to address that, and it might not be entirely up to us. Our current CTE center is a partnership with Midland College, and I believe Greenwood ISD uses that as well, if I'm not mistaken. So our recommendation here to the board may seem a little more ambiguous, but we would encourage the board to do further work on that, to really form a team to focus on that and work with our fellow stakeholders to come up with the best possible plan. We did not feel as a committee that we had the necessary expertise to flesh that out, but we do believe it's an important area that needs a much more consideration. For our third one, and I think this may get to some of the numbers issues that Mr. Hodges has raised, we're also recommending further demographic studies. As Mr. Hodges said, it is really important that we're all on the same page of what we think our growth patterns will look like realistically, not only in terms of the number of students we may incorporate, but where those students are likely to live. Forgive me, my eyesight's not what it used to be, but to highlight a few of these, to evaluate our elementary attendance zones and concerns for 23-24 and beyond, to look into the possibility of the need for an elementary school south of I-20, potentially southwest, to verify that any future high school locations, should we keep that door open in the future, are appropriate and based on where the boundaries should be. And while we're not going to recommend a third high school at this time, consideration to be given to potential need for one in the future, especially as Midland continues to expand into the northwest. And then we also have said that we would like to see more work done on deferred maintenance priorities. I know I would like to thank Mr. Hodges for making that a constant conversation in the committee. Because as he points out, if we're going to build anything new, we need to make sure that we have the ability to maintain what we've got and what we're building. And I would like to thank you for holding us to the fire on that. And then finally, the last of the more conceptual ones is the aspect of community communication throughout all of this. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school to say that there is a real sense in Midland that there's a lack of trust between the community and the school district that I love so much. And I'm not going to get into the hows and the whys and how much is real and how much is perception. But I do want to point out that even if it's mostly perception, the perception of mistrust is mistrust. And whatever the board does, if there is a bond committee going forward, if these recommendations are accepted by the board, we urge the board to make sure that we are as transparent as we can possibly be and that we bring in stakeholders and that's not just window dressing, but that the members of the community who have concerns or questions are truly heard and where appropriate those concerns are addressed. We believe that having the whole community on the same page is vital if we're going to get the work done that all of us in Midland want to see done for the benefit of our students and our families. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Welts, while we're changing speakers, I would just like to say that I also had Mr. Franks for Honors Economics. He is a wonderful, fabulous human, and I hope everyone gets the experience of having a teacher like him.
All right. Hi, my name is Whitney Groves, and I am also a product of MISD. I attended Parker Elementary, Sam Houston, and De Zavala, thank you, cluster system. I went to Carver for GEM. I attended Goddard, Lee Freshman, and Lee High School. I then had the privilege of having my dream job, and I taught for 10 years at Goddard and taught speech and drama. And now I am a PTA mom back at Parker where it all started. I have 2 boys in the district, and I joined this committee because I wanted to get off the bench and into the game, because I want to be part of the solution, and because it's time. It's time for us to find a way to make things happen. And nothing happens if we all just sit around and don't do anything. So I decided to be part of the solution. So, with all of that you've heard and read, we looked at all of these considerations. We went with the safety and the demographics and all of those things. And what we did is, as a committee, we then came up with a ranked list to present to you of a long-range facility plan for MISD. And that I get to show you what that is. So here we go. Am I supposed to hit the button? Okay, cool. Sure. Would you do that? Yeah. Okay, cool. So our first number one priority, again, somewhat thank you to Mr. Hodges, is the general campus improvements for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Any move going forward needs to include at least $50 million to take care of the deferred maintenance that has not been taken care of. Number two on our list is 2 new high schools, both 9th through 12th grade, new buildings for Midland High and for Legacy High School. Number 3 is a new elementary school in Northwest Midland at the Lone Star Trails, where we do already own land. Number 4 is to repurpose Midland Freshman Campus to a middle school, and that would be a 6th through 8th. And there would need to be a minimum of $6 million to do the campus improvements that have been identified by the Facilities Committee already. Number 5 would be repurposing Legacy High School to a middle school. Its central location makes it a very good option for this. It would need at least $20 million of campus improvement, and a couple of other considerations would be that the cafeteria would not be functional in its current state for a school full of 6th through 8th graders, and so there would need to be some expansion there, and the tennis courts are currently unusable, so those would need to be resurfaced. Number 6 is general campus improvements, accessibility, and code. Number 7 is demolish Legacy Freshman Campus and designate it as a future school site, and we would like to ask that future demographic studies would inform future planning committees on what type of school that would need to be. Number 8 would be rezoning Franks Elementary if and when a new elementary school opens at Lone Star Trails, because that is where those kids go to school now. Number 9, and this was one that we spent a lot of time talking about, is determining the future use of the Midland High School campus. What we would like to ask is that this board would convene a committee of MHS stakeholders that would provide input on various and possible options. Some of the things that we talked about would be a specialty campus or some type of campus of choice in the secondary area, so something like a CTE center or a specialized middle school fine arts or STEM or something like that. Another idea would be a professional development center, early childhood center, a family service center, and we would also like to encourage the looking into selling the property and what that could bring to the district. If the building is repurposed, we would like to state that it should be used for education. It doesn't need to just become something non-educational. If the entire campus is repurposed, account for a minimum of $30 million in general campus improvements. And if it is repurposed as a campus of choice, the cafeteria would also need attention because it would not be able to house the number of students. Number 10 is general campus improvements, building interiors. 11, general campus improvements, site improvements. And number 12, general campus improvements, building exteriors. And our final recommendation is the idea of purchasing land for a future elementary school in the district's southwest region. So that is what we have to present to you. Our next steps would be some master plans for future buildings, and after we get information back on the CTE Center idea and the Midland High, what to do with that, then our committee would approve the final draft of our long-range plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to thank again the members of the committee who have spent so much time and energy in working through all of this. And as many of them stated, on some topics much longer than others. But if trustees have any questions for members of the committee, a representative from Huckabee is here as well, who completed the facilities assessment and then helped facilitate this process. We're happy to answer any of those.
Mr. Scuddy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we go back to slide, I think it's 11? And this may be a question for Huckabee or you, Ms. Spencer. It's twofold-ish. In the graphic, when it talks about Amarillo ISD's most recent bond, which was just pre-COVID 2017 or 18, it was $100 million. Do we know what that was for?
No, I
okay.
don't. We looked it up, but I don't remember the exact project.
Okay.
So I'll have to look it up. So.
My other, if not question, concern that you can comment on is that while I understand we have unique economic engines in the Permian Basin, I look at that slide and I don't see anyone that would be a, quote, peer for MISD except Ector County. I don't believe that Denton, Pflugerville, those metroplex, beyond just the number of students. And I think so much of our challenges are rooted in things that are unique to our environment. And so I would challenge Huckabee and us to really think outside the box about what are our peers across the state and how do we really do an apples to apples comparison as opposed to maybe just extrapolating who's close to us population student-wise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis?
Spencer, or I'm sorry, Mr. Hayward, that's right. That could be. Representative, the last slide talks about next steps, and so I was interested if you might put some kind of time frame on anticipated completion of next steps or what the plan is to achieve those next steps.
So we have, the next step is to form a committee who will take a deeper dive into the career and technology aspect. We have spoken with advisory committees and indicated that that was going to be one of the recommendations in this report and asked for anyone who would like to participate in that. I've also spoken with Michaela Murdoch, who is our director of CTE, and she has provided input into who she would like to see serve on that committee. And so it's representatives of the school district, the community, and incorporating Midland College as well, because they're a key partner in that, and taking a deeper dive into that. If it is determined by the committee that CTE would have its own or recommended its own standalone facility, i.e. transition into Midland High School, then that would become part of the recommendation, and we would be finished at that point. If it is not the recommendation of the committee could be that the programs remain on the comprehensive high schools, then we'll need to convene additional committee to talk about Midland High specifically and what should happen with that facility as a recommendation as part of the long-range plan. And then the committee would give their stamp of approval there, and it would be presented back to you. CTE specifically, we'd like to wrap that up before the end of the school year so we can capture our internal stakeholders while they're still in our buildings and prior to the break of the summer. And then, as I said, those results are dependent upon what happens next and if we need another committee. But we would hope to wrap up mid to late summer, so that way we have a fully developed plan going into the next school year. And Mr. Hafer can talk about timelines and what decisions the board would have from there.
And within that, you focused on the CTE component, but within that time frame that's going on, you would expect to get the updated demographic studies that you mentioned? Or? No,
sir. The demographic study will be done again next fall. We have engaged another partner, Templeton Demographics, who will be supporting that, and we want to have next year's enrollment information to make the best decisions about that. So this year's demographic study that was conducted, although we have enrollment information from now, we'd really like to see where we are next year so we can make good predictions based on that.
Mr. Pounds, I have a real quick question. Because they're asking for a CTE committee and we didn't put it on the agenda tonight, does the board have to approve that committee, or is that the superintendent's discretion?
Yes, the
Okay.
administration can develop that committee.
Thank you. Mr. Marquez?
So, on the slide for the recommendation considerations for strategic implementation, under different demographic update, it says monitor the potential need for an elementary school south of I-20. And I'm like the gentleman here, I can get very passionate, right? And because I've been listening and involved in committees and discussions for over 24 years, I would say now. I can still remember when I was invited to the church up here when the lines were redrawn and Wadley and Midland Drive, that all the way to the loop, that pie area was cut out for busing only after the new plan was made back in '02, going into '03. And I remember how mad those people were. They were so mad they raised, I think, $40,000 within a week to send a lawyer to Washington so they could be heard in the case that the interveners were only allowed at the time, I believe. But with that said, you know, every time I talk about a school south of the interstate, you know, the first response I get is usually the obstacles of the school. My conversations have never been, my reply has never been like, what a great idea. The numbers show a school. Yeah, it would be needed. It would serve well. It's a different demographic population that would, you know, really serve well. You know, usually the response to that question has always been, there's no water. There's no sewer. I even heard things like there's no electrical. And me being in a industry where I've built a lot of things all over the nation, in a lot of places where there was absolutely nothing for miles, you know, and build facilities that end up having water, gas, oil, electricity, potentially other refining processes to the facilities. So, you know, I see the numbers that are on the south of the interstate. And to me, there's just absolutely no doubt in my mind that if anywhere, we should have an elementary south of the interstate. You know, yet on the plan here, we already show potential elementary north of town. You know, when that neighborhood is quite new compared to the neighborhoods that have existed south of the interstate. Now, south of the interstate, right, land's cheaper. You're going to have clusters of neighborhoods. You know, they're not a traditional type neighborhood in a sense. You know what I mean? I spoke here before about how my dad moved me in 1980 to County Road 120, and we moved out there and literally went out there with an axe to cut the mesquites down so we could get the trailer in there, you know, to build a little road to get the trailer moved in there so we could move out there, and did so, and lived out there for over a month without electricity or water. And that year was the highest death rate in the state of Texas of people because they didn't have air conditioning. And we survived it without zero air, zero water, on County Road 120. But that same scenario is happening today. People are moving to Midland. They're finding the cheapest place they can find, and they're clustering in those areas. And that's why there's so much growth out there, because that's the only thing people can afford. And they're not traditional neighborhoods. But the need is there because we're busing all those children across the interstate, for miles and miles and miles. I live south of the interstate. I get to see them at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's cold out there, when it's hot out there. So I get to witness the people piling up at these four-way stop signs, at the mobile home park store, in the mornings, piling up to get on buses because there's not a neighborhood school, within 5 miles, or potentially now some of the neighborhoods are 6 or 7 miles. And the demographic study shows 2 areas that are, have enough people to put one elementary on each side. So with that said, I would, the work that the committee has done is great. But I would tell you to go back and as we continue to move forward, to really consider the fact that, we talk about, adult behavior. We talk about moving these numbers. We talk about the situation that Travis got in, right? There's other circumstances the school got in that situation. It wasn't just the fact that the kids weren't reading and we didn't have all the right teachers. And no, there's other things like, potentially overpopulation, the displacement in a sense. So, why does we always end up with one school potentially that's, having a hard time? Well, there's been a shift, there's been a change, and so it's not the same rate of kids that you end up potentially in one area because, well, we got to go back and look why this one area doesn't have all the kids piling up over here. Well, we got to go back and see why what's driving the economic factors of that. And generally, I've been here since '77, and I've seen those communities, and I've been out there with them. And the thing is that, we have not had consideration, and it's been a topic of discussion for a long time in Midland. Like I said, for 24 years, talking about the need for support, in the south side and south of the interstate.
And I think that's why it's important just to go back to the recommendations and see that the committee did make a recommendation that the district should consider looking at property in southwestern Midland for a future school site, and allow the future demographic studies to inform when that school should be built. Right now, we don't have a site for a future school, and so it's important to consider that first.
And I'm glad you said that because there's plenty of land available that's in those growth areas that could be used up for an elementary school. Now, once again, the neighborhood doesn't look, it's not a traditional neighborhood, you know what I mean? You got the guy that owns 5 acres, you got the guy that owns a quarter of an acre.
Right.
You know what I mean? You got the guy that owns a 100 by 50 lot. The people or the residents that are out there, the voice they have is basically me trying to promote the fact that, hey, listen, the service needs to come closer to them too. And like I said, every time we have that discussion, the first thing I hear is, well, there's no water, there's no sewer,
Robert,
and And, you know, to see the amazing things that are going on in West Texas, like going to the outer space right down the road. You know what I mean? A gentleman decided to do his own company, his own thing, and bought his own ranch and said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and here we go. And to think of the engineering that's been born here in Midland, Texas, for gas processing, for oil processing, for digging a lateral for 2 miles, you know, oil well, to frack this particular well in multiple stages, to make it produce up to 4,000 barrels a day, when we used to produce 100, 200 barrels a day. You know, to see all this amazing stuff, and yet, you know, to not have the clear conversation and consideration to say, hey, listen, we have these folks out there, and, you know, that neighborhood is just as valuable in a sense of any other neighborhood, in a sense that we should consider.
Robert.
It should be a consideration to bring all those accounts into effect. And just monitoring, we've been monitoring for 24 years, you know, and I don't know if we could use a different word or not, but, you know, we've been monitoring for 24 years, you know what I mean? We can continue monitoring for another 20 years, and the people are just piling up out there. You know, so, you know, I say it in the sense, like I said, that, you know, trying to bring it holistically, the conversation of all those years put together. And, you know, the conversations I've had with other leaders in the past regarding the sentiment about how, you know, how the town is looked at in a sense. You know, one of the conversations here is at the beginning, right? You know, what are we going to leave behind? What are we going to move forward with? And, you know, you know, personally, I would like to leave behind the fact that I haven't even considered that conversation. I would like to leave behind the fact that we even haven't had a discussion, you know. There should be, you know, a conversation. It was left out of the last bond conversation, but, you know, we got to have the conversation because it's a real need in a sense. Now, you know, I'm going to say publicly that, you know, that's not an end all, be all to everything. But, you know, I'm bringing up the awareness because we do have to make progress eventually, you know, and make that milestone move, you know, eventually. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Marquez. Ms. Joyner?
Hi, thank you. I have quite a few questions and feedback. Kelly, I know you and I have talked extensively about all of this and had many conversations, but one conversation that I've come back to with Dr. Ramsey and just generally how we function as a district is we form these committees, which I think is extremely valuable, and we have to do it, and it's an important piece. But one thing that I think needs to happen is that we need to be able to have this back and forth with the board early on so that you guys in your next phase with the facilities committee can take the board's feedback, not just questions necessarily on the work already performed, but so that you, when you go back to the table, you have information from us so that work is not in vain when you come back the second time around. So some of that will be questions and some of it will be feedback. Take with it what you will. So I'll just work through really quickly some of my questions. Okay, so on I don't have page numbers on my printout, but this slide about the deferred maintenance that's to the tune of $300 million, is that correct? That is the overall number that we are referring to at the back of the list in order of numerical recommendations. Is that correct?
No, that is
Do
not
those
correct.
correspond?
The numbers, the dollar amounts on the slides that the first slide that you're referencing is from the comprehensive facilities assessment that was done. So that's the overall deficiencies that were identified in that report that was completed in the spring of 2021.
But so at the end of the report, it refers to general campus improvements, building interiors. If you flip back over here, it says building interiors are at 116 million.
Right. So
is that what
so
we're
there were
referencing?
not dollar amounts associated at the end, but yes, you're right. Those are the categories from the facilities assessment. So the important thing, and there was some mention of that tonight, is that we did not receive that facilities assessment and do nothing with it. So as soon as that facilities assessment, the district received that and it was presented to the board, the maintenance team has gotten to work. And
Right.
so
Okay.
some of the projects have been approved by the board. Those multi-layered projects such as the roofs. We're in the middle of preparing the project for the HVAC. There's been things that have been happening throughout the school year, last school year, that we have updated you and the community on. So the work has continued. And so as the work has continued, that dollar amount has begun to dwindle down.
Right.
But we also have to remember that those were 2020 costs. And so COVID and other inflation and
everything's
supply chain have affected that
more
as well.
expensive.
But that is an overall comprehensive number. And again, we have done a great deal of work. The maintenance team, just a yeoman's job in making sure that those things are being addressed as we can.
Well, and the reason I ask is because I'm trying to understand where that 300 million fits in this overall conversation about what we're aiming for, because the number one recommended thing on your list is 50 million as identified by the facilities assessment and operations team. So how does that correspond with the 300 million? Are we talking about the 50 million that's coming in this draft as recommendation is off the top of this, would be the top priority of the 50?
So
of the
as
300
far as
deferred?
addressing deficiencies from the facilities assessment, yes.
Okay, and that's the number one recommendation.
Specific to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, which is what MEP is,
Okay.
which is a very large number if you look at the slide.
Right.
And again, we've begun to whittle away, for
Right,
lack
the
of a better
HVAC
term,
and the roofs.
at handling some of those things internally,
Okay.
and using district general funds as well as ESSER funds in order to accomplish some of those things. So as I was charged by the committee of trying to narrow in on what might a bond planning committee need to
Right.
consider if we got to that phase, we narrowed taking the facilities assessment, the work that's been done, and working with the maintenance and operations team.
And allocating $50
$50 million to that.
Okay, to tackle the 300 million that we know.
Specifically in mechanical,
Okay.
electrical, and plumbing.
Thank you for that clarification. The next question / conversation is, so in the conversation around the CTE Center, I had a conversation with one of your committee members that there was some research done into ECISD that has a dedicated CTE center, and I have not done this on my own research here. I'm repeating something I heard. That they have capacity for 1,200 kids, but they only have 350 kids attending. That to me seems like a drag on best efficiencies in terms of what it costs to operate a campus, especially one that is CTE and requires specific, improvements to make it a good campus. To that conversation, I personally think that between Coleman High School and our relationships in the community with Midland College and even UTPB maybe, I think that we can suss out a place to hold those CTE campuses in a place where we can be really efficient with our capacities, our schools, and get them really good education. I think that when it comes to the Midland High conversation, as a Midland High graduate, this is also just feedback for you. I felt like, let me find that. Of the list that you included, I believe that the possible knocking down of Midland High is not an unreasonable conversation to be having. I think with the amount that we spent to purchase the golf course for the possible new site of Midland High, I think that we could recoup some taxpayer money if we were to sell the property. And then as far as Lee Freshman is concerned, I think that, and I also liked the idea of, the other one was the Early Childhood Center. I think that that's a fabulous idea. But when we talk about the $30 million associated with the general improvements that would be required at Midland Freshman, Midland High School, and Legacy to make them retrofitted into the schools that they'll be serving, how do you envision the timing of that? Because say things were to progress, we were able to have 2 new high schools. Help me understand when those improvements would be able to take place, because we would need to have kids on campus. Are we capable of doing that over a summer? Does it take a year? How does that align with the building of high schools?
So, point of clarification,
Okay.
On the Midland High and the dollar amount specifically.
Mhm.
The dollar amount is reflective of the projects that would be necessary to address the deficiencies identified in the facilities
Not
assessment.
to make it a new campus.
Not to make it a new campus.
That's just to get it to a reasonable.
If we left the building as
workable
is,
building.
the things that really should be done in order to address the deficiencies identified. Now, if it were converted to a CTE center, that's a completely different conversation because of the programs that would need.
It would be much more.
Right. And the same with an early childhood center. I mean,
Right.
there are different specifications that would be required for that. And when we look at overall, depending upon what program may be decided or recommended for there, then that's how we would determine the timeline and how it needed to fit into play. Obviously, making it a CTE center would have a little bit higher priority in that the purpose really is to relieve the capacity at the comprehensive high
Right.
schools.
But that brings me to my next question, which is, there was no mention that I can find of what 2 high schools would cost in the report. If it's there, I missed it. I know in a draft before that I've reviewed, it was there. But what are we ultimately, when we come down to the numbers of the $50 million for the number 1 recommendation of deferred maintenance, and then number 2 is the high schools, what are we talking about?
So there have been some estimations, but again, it's going to be a final dollar
Right,
amount
of
is going to
course,
be
these
based
are all
on square
ballparks.
footage and the number of students you're trying to serve and the programs that are placed in there. And so I do not want to speak for the expert, who
because
is probably going to be very hesitant to give you.
I know, but the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, you may be able to build a slightly smaller comprehensive high school if you were to do a CTE, but the cost of doing that and bringing Midland High up to even just base level of $30 million of improvements, and then you add on to top of what it would cost to add the CTE programming in terms of improvements that would have to be made, would we not necessarily, just looking strictly at the dollars, be better off building slightly 2 bigger comprehensive high schools and be able to have the conversation around CTE with our partners?
Well, I think the real question and the reason that the Long Range Planning Committee wants a more expert committee to get together is really about what's best for kids.
Okay.
And when we're looking at the programs that we're providing. And so ultimately, the list is long, and our district would not have the bond capacity to accomplish everything that's identified on that list.
Of course.
And so ultimately, a bond planning committee would then have to prioritize what is most important that will best meet the needs of the students of Midland and this community in order to put a bond package together that the community would support.
Okay. Because we did hear very loudly in the last bond that it was too expensive. And so I think we just need to be really cognizant, and that's one of my appeals to the committee, is we need to be really careful about not careful, but specific about what our priorities are. I know it's important to have a long list so that we know where we're going as a district. Extremely important. We haven't had that. I think that's part of the reason we are where we are today. But making sure that we get the nuts and bolts of what has to happen in order for any of the other pieces to fall in place. And I personally believe that's the two comprehensive high schools, and that's why I'm trying to understand what that dollar amount looks like and what the capacity is for the estimate. Because I think it's unfair to talk about other dollar amounts and not those dollar amounts.
Well, we had those dollar amounts because of the facilities assessment that we charged Huckabee in the beginning with doing. And if he's willing to give you an estimate, certainly. But I want to go back to the purpose of long-range planning. It really is about developing the plan.
Right. No, I know.
And so we had a really difficult time, probably until about February or even March, of differentiating that, because many members of the committee were part of the last bond planning committee. And so it was very hard to not talk about the dollar amounts. And but the purpose of this is really to have a plan together to really move our district forward facility-wise to meet the educational needs of students, and then give that plan to the board, who may or may not choose to call for a bond planning committee.
Right, but I think, okay, yes, I accept that. Okay.
Good evening. Okay. I'll just give you some kind of basics here as we're talking, as when we start general numbers, as we start looking at what we see around the state of Texas, school buildings cost. And we know Midland is a little bit higher than what we see in other parts of the state. So typically when we just look at, say, a 3,000 student high school, normally you would, if in planning a new high school, you typically program roughly about 200 square feet per student. As the school, and that's for a smaller high school, that's like a 2,000. As the schools get bigger, all you're doing really is you're already building a lot of those core facilities as you're building the campus, and you're adding classrooms to get the space additional, plus dining and library and that type of stuff. But you could probably squeeze it down to 185 square feet per student. 3,000 just a 3,000 student high school at 185 square feet per student is about 550 to 600,000 square foot building. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing is about high schools right now, comprehensive high schools are ranging from $350 to $425 a square foot. So that puts you in the range of about $200 to about $240 million
per high school.
Per high school.
Right.
Except he said 3,000 students.
Right, and we're going to have to plan for closer to 4.
And I don't know if you mind going back, but if you look at the demographic data, and again, we're going to do all of this again in the fall, and any future planning committee, including a potential bond committee, will have updated information. But if you go back to a chart, yes, and look at the 2030 data, which is what we have through.
Right.
I mean, you're looking at needing to build.
Yeah.
Without a CTE center,
it's
you're looking at
3,700.
4,000 student campuses.
Right.
Well,
and the reason
I don't want to.
I'm not
I
trying
want to jump in here too. The demographic study was just for that first 10 years. So what we did when the committee asked us to, okay, well, we want to see what it would look like in 20 years. What we did is we took your demographic for the last 10 years, averaged it out, so whatever that average was, then we took it as an average for the next 10 years.
Right.
So it's not scientific on the second 10 years. It's just trying to get some idea of a potential number.
And I am not trying to nail y'all down in any way. The only reason I'm bringing it up now is because to the slide that Mr. Wilkes spoke about, that we have to start having these conversations openly, often, commonly, because that is what makes people feel like they understand what's happening, that this is not something new, and that these numbers are something that have been discussed and studied for a really long time. And so I don't think it's unfair to start having that conversation now. And I understand it's all estimates. We're just forecasting. The other thing that I would like to just say for the record, I am relieved and happy to see that the recommendation is for 2 high schools. I know that that was probably one of the bigger hurdles in the room. I have no idea, I wasn't there. But I just think that that's where we need to start. I'm hoping that we can get going on that. I think the comment about the TEKS realigning for a 3-year course for science and history just reconfirms what we already felt, which is that 6th needs to be on campus through 8th, and that relieves so many of our elementary issues. So I appreciate you for highlighting that. And I love the idea that it could possibly allow us to bring in more pre-K. I already spoke about the CTE. I also did agree with Robert about the I-20 elementary. I think that's a conversation. Again, we have to line up our dominoes and create the right cascade, and I think that's in the conversation. Preventative maintenance, let me just make sure I've gone all over this. Oh, I did want to point out, because I've already had this conversation with Mr. Phelps for the record, that under the capital improvement projects, 1 was 50 million, 2 was new high schools, and the conversation about the tennis courts at Legacy, it's my understanding that they're already accounted for and will be resurfaced in 2025 because we are on a rolling schedule with them. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of your budgeting. Okay, so again, is this the same comment about the 30 million that you had for Midland High, the 6 million that you have listed for Midland Freshen to become a middle school? That's just 6 million in deferred. That's not to in any way make it, but it should already be
not
up.
renovation.
Right, okay.
But in Midland Freshman's case, it's essentially a.
It's already ready because it's a secondary.
Yes.
Okay. And then the one question I don't think you were able to touch on, probably because I jumped in, was the timing of said improvements to the subsequent the Midland Freshman and Legacy that we would have to do in order to make them middle schools. Would it align with the opening of 2 new high schools? How do we envision that? Would we keep our 6th graders on campus? I just don't understand how we would have time to do all of it, since we have to have those campuses to house students.
Well, your high schools are basically your linchpin projects.
Right.
Until you find relief at the other campuses, it's very difficult to do that work during the school year when the campuses are occupied. And summers have become very short.
Mm-hmm.
And construction has only gotten longer. Normally we used to schedule 24 months to build a comprehensive high school.
Okay.
Of about that size. Now we're looking, we typically put in our schedules 28 to 30 months to build a high school. We're seeing significant issues, obviously, with product capability, what we can get, when we can get it, timelines, and labor in the construction industry is at a 50-year, probably the worst time that we could be in right now from a labor source. Every contractor, school contractor that we deal with around the state of Texas is desperately searching for, laborers to be able to do that work. So it is we are
It's going to be
experiencing a struggle.
logistically difficult, and I'll get with Kelly later to discuss further. So it is my wondering and pondering. So
But
thank you.
yes, so just me thinking about, we haven't really sat down and talked about this, but the high school, you would have to build something to relieve the pressure of the current student load that you have to be able to start the renovations on the existing campuses. So that would typically mean, if you're looking at a bond program, you would start those projects once you move students out. Then that would begin the process of manipulating the other projects.
So this is the part of the long-range plan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask, I just need to ask one clarifying question from Ms. Joyner. You said that you heard that overwhelmingly in the last bond election, but to me, which overwhelmingly were you talking about? Overwhelmingly good for it?
No, I was saying that I did hear that it was expensive from the taxpayers.
Okay.
And so I think that if we just keep that nut close when we're thinking about planning and prioritizing, that definitely needs to be a conversation. And that's why I'm asking specifically about numbers, because it's hard to long-range plan and forecast and prioritize a list of wants and needs without understanding what those wants and needs actually cost. And so you can't really put one in front of the other unless you know. So that was my point.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, because there's a whole bunch of people that were for it, so.
Of course.
And it was just a minimal amount of differentiation of, and the number you gave earlier, I think, just from my recollection, when we went through it the last time, it's just gone up a little bit. And that was discussed before as to how if we didn't take action then, obviously, with time going forward, the cost goes up to build anything, so.
Well,
Appreciate that.
we've seen significant increases in materials, as most people in our industry have seen over the last 12 to 18 months. We've seen on average within the construction industry, at least within the school market, of about 10% this last year. We predicted, most people are saying that it might hit another 10% this year. It has started to level off. We're hoping that drops back down into that 5, maybe into the 5 to 6 range. But it is going to be higher than normal. If you look historically in school construction, it's about 4.5% per year on average.
There's a gentleman in the audience that did a real good job last time of presenting the presentation and did some great job with numbers and talked about how it would go up and what it would go up, but obviously we ran through it and it is what it is now. So, but I'm hoping that as we have the conversation, people realize that we're talking about 2025 or 26 potentially, once everybody gets lined up and gets our ducks in a row, potentially, if it all were to come about.
Well, yes, I wanted to say, from just so y'all understand when you're thinking about this, from whenever, if at some point y'all have a bond program, when the bond program passes, to get a high school on the ground, it takes 3 years.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Mr. Davis?
I was so excited to hear about when the next steps were going to be completed that I forgot to thank the work that the Long Range Planning Committee has done to date with the leadership, the members. The presenters tonight, I was struck with their interest, their passion, their commitment, and their enthusiasm. And I hope that now that your recommendations are becoming more public, that you will weather with thick skin any comments, feedbacks, or questions, because no one can agree on everything, but y'all have put in the work, and you're going to put in additional work. And we can't thank you enough for all the time that you spent listening to each other, listening about the data, talking with each other, and trying to come to consensus of what you think that priorities for the district should be. And so, thank you all very much.
Mr. Bishop?
I also did what Mr. Davis just said, and also, as everyone has said too, from a board standpoint, the transparency is very important, especially to me, and it should be to this board on what the committees are telling us as a board and what the community is wanting for anything to go from a taxpayer standpoint is to be transparent so that the perception, if you will, that the board is listening to what the community is telling the board, that the needs of the community and what's needed for our children, for our community, and in our district. So again, I appreciate the work that you all have put in, as well as Ms. Spencer and her staff, and then the ones that volunteered to be on these communities, the ones that volunteered their time and their thoughts. So I commend you all for your time, and I know there's more work to be done, and there's more time for us as a board to listen to what y'all are putting together for this to happen. So again, I say I applaud you and thank you for that time.
Ms. Spencer, thank you again, and Mr. Hafer and all you that are here in the meeting tonight for your time working with the committee. We look definitely forward to the work of the CTE committee, and we know that we have a really valuable partner with Midland College and all they're already doing with us and how we work to make that partnership better for all of the people of MISD, but also of Midland. So thank you guys for the great work. Next item on the agenda is item 5B, Achievement Zone Update. And Mr. Cuellar, we welcome you to the podium.
Good evening, President Murray, members of the board, Superintendent Ramsey. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come before you and give you an update on one of our strategic initiatives that we have launched this year called the Achievement Zone. As the board can recall, we had a robust and engaging conversation back in our December work session where the academic team really had an opportunity to lay out the academic plan on how we were going to really wrap around and support our schools. Most importantly, how we would be supporting our most struggling schools that could have benefited from a very strategic and intensive approach at how we were going to support them. Before we get started, though, I am joined by three esteemed colleagues and three phenomenal leaders. I'm joined by the Jones team here, Principal Angie Aaron, as well as Lacey Sanchez, who are joining us from Jones Elementary, and we're also joined by Principal Gabriel Salgado, the principal at Peace. One of the things that we are trying to do in board meetings is the central office or DSC staff can stand up here all day long and do presentations, but what's really important is for us to highlight and articulate the wonderful work that's really happening within the walls of our buildings. So having our two leaders here with us, as well as our literacy strategist from Jones, they're going to have the opportunity to really share with the board how the things are progressing in both of their achievement zone schools, and really be able to highlight some of the high leverage strategies that are really propelling them forward. Here's an overview of our tiered support model. One of the things that this team has done, when Superintendent Ramsey got here and assembled the team, it was very, very important that we were strategic in how we were differentiating our support strategy to our schools. We created a three-tiered model, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 3 being all of our D and F schools that were going to be supported by our most intensive support strategy. But within Tier 3, you have a subset of schools called the Achievement Zone. What we did was we looked at a variety of different complex indicators and determined, out of these 18 schools, which was going to be the subset of schools that could really benefit from a very intensive tactical approach at how we would wrap around our schools to really support them. So the Achievement Zone is going to be that strategic zone within Tier 3. The three areas that we were going to really focus our efforts on was going to be around leadership development, was going to be around human capital, and differentiated interventions. One of the things that's really, really important was when we got here, we were not going to apply cookie-cutter approaches to how we were going to support our schools. Every single school, especially our schools in the Achievement Zone, needed something very, very prescribed and individualized and differentiated for themselves. Yes, ma'am.
I just have one quick question. So you said of the 18 schools that are D and F currently, how many were selected as Achievement Zone schools?
We have 10.
10. And how was that decided? Do you just, real briefly?
Yeah, real briefly, we actually utilized a matrix that had a variety of different variables on it, such as looking at special ed programming, looking at our emerging bilingual population, looking at just a variety of different variables where that would lean for us to be able to say that this would be a school that could really benefit from a more intensive tactical approach.
Okay, and the only reason I interrupted is so I could better understand, as we talked about the Achievement Zone schools, what specifically we were looking at.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Under leadership development, we're going to hear a little bit about our wraparound strategy for how the LLI team has really been specifically pushing into all of our campuses every day, every week. All of our Achievement Zone schools are being seen by an instructional member of the team every single week on a weekly basis. And we're going to hear a little bit about what that looks like from some of our colleagues here today. And how we're actually strategically going into buildings. We're coaching, We're really mentoring, and we're also providing, that job-embedded professional development. We're working with our school improvement teams, working with teacher groups, really around data analysis, looking at school improvement, really focusing on curriculum instruction and pedagogical practices. Human capital is an approach around how we're really wrapping around our educators and providing that extra layer of support. But also, in addition, one of the things that the district has done that has provided significant amount of value is the literacy strategist position that has come into all of our elementary schools, and that has been a significant value add. And we're going to hear from one of our literacy strategists today around what that work is looking like specific to the achievement zone. When we look at differentiated interventions, I really want to highlight the work that our schools are doing, but specific to this conversation, our achievement zone schools, all of our schools are doing not only intensive interventions or tutorials or support for students, but they're also doing things with outside the school day as well. We have a variety of achievement zone schools that are doing Saturday camps, tutorials, after-school tutorials, and also working with our families too to be able to help better support their students at home. So it's really, really exciting to really see how our campuses have really been uplifting that focus on teaching and learning in our campuses to our families. Just going back to one of the superintendent priorities, when Dr. Ramsey got here and did her listening and learning tour and was collecting all the feedback from both internal and external stakeholders, one of the things that was really illuminated through the feedback was really making sure that we were positioning the DSC to be more of a support center hub. And what that means is us just not making decisions from a disconnected building and giving out giving out direction isolated from the work. What that means is how are we going to convert the DSC to be more of a hands-on, elbow-to-elbow support strategy to how we're pushing in our entire team and working with schools on the ground. The work is in schools. There's a lot of work that's being done at the DSC, I could tell you that. But at least for the majority of everything that we're doing on the academic side of the house, the work is happening in schools. And really, really excited how this team has really positioned themselves to be a significant support to what's happening in our schools day to day. If we can, yes, we do have meetings at the central office, but if you look at calendars, you'll see a lot of dedicated space and time to where we are physically in schools. This is just an idea. This is just a quick glimpse in terms of how does the tiered model of supports really look like. If we're looking at Tier 3 specifically, that means that our Tier 3 schools are receiving everything Tier 1 receives, in addition to what Tier 2 receives. So Tier 3 receiving the most robust, intensive, and targeted supports across each of those three domains that we spoke about: leadership development, human capital support, and differentiated interventions. This is an example of what the support and response team looks like. We call it the SRT. This is just a sampling of a variety of the different individuals that are pushing into schools. We have associate superintendents, executive directors, we have directors, we have officers, we have coordinators, we have program managers. We have a plethora of support that has been pushing into schools every single day, and this just really articulates the amount of individuals that are really working collaboratively and interdepartmentally with each other for the betterment of our schools and kids. It's exciting. So our success to date, just highlighting some of the successes here. In first year of implementation in our campuses for leadership development, we have really focused around data analysis, but specifically around the accountability model and the accountability system. One of the trainings that our schools have been going through all year is really looking at how, not just looking at achievement as a lagging indicator, but looking at student growth as a leading indicator, and really highlighting how we're utilizing student growth to make decisions, to make decisions in the classroom. And that has been really exciting to really see, the amount of growth and professional development that has really come along in terms of really pivoting our focuses to how we're really zooming in on every single learner. When I say every single learner, we're not just looking at our learners that are struggling most. When I talk about growth, if we have a student that successfully mastered, that year's worth of learning, and they achieve a master's on their assessment, we want to ensure that that student sustains and continues to grow. We don't want to see that student regress. So really looking at growth, it means that we're looking at every single student across the learning continuum and ensuring that, that students are not regressing or falling behind, no matter what arena they're in. Looking at human capital, we've really been focusing on professional learning communities. I really want to thank the board, because one of the things that the board adopted when we adopted Lone Star governance was a superintendent constraint measure around PLCs, and ensuring that we were instituting PLCs at a very highly effective level. And I want to say and give really good feedback that PLCs is a critical lever in what's happening in our schools. Bringing educators together to be able to talk about student progress, to be able to talk about the data, and to be able to really talk about action planning and how to support every level of learner, it's just been very powerful. And we're going to hear a little bit about that today from our colleagues. Embedded coaching, especially through opportunity culture, has led to increased use of data to inform instruction. Opportunity culture is just one lever, but when we talk about coaching, we're really talking about coaching from all levels. Here to my right, to your left, we're joined by just a sampling of the LLI team, and the LLI team ranges, depending on officer to coordinator to all the way up to associate superintendent. You have coaching that is ranging from principal to assistant principal to literacy strategists to MCL to department chairpersons, even to support staff. And so that has been really one of the most critical levers, and we're going to talk about one of the surveys that we gave out to the Achievement Zone leaders in identifying, out of all of these different initiatives or, different pieces that we've implemented this year, what do you consider to be the most powerful? And one of the things that leaders identified in each of our schools is really around the coaching and mentorship that's been happening on a frequent basis. So here, identifying the top 4 levers that leaders have identified as a critical and value add for them is the instructional support visits by our LLI directors and staff, weekly associate superintendent school visits, our monthly Leadership Institute meetings with principals, and also our monthly Achievement Zone meetings as well. So our Achievement Zone leaders have identified 4, out of many different initiatives, but these were the top 4 that they felt had the most value add for them in terms of their own personal development on their campus. This is just an infographic here articulating the schools that are in our Achievement Zone for year 1. And talking about data to date, there's a lot of data points, but in terms of once the smoke settles at the end of the year and we're done taking STAR, we'll be able to really provide the board a very robust picture in terms of how much our schools have really accelerated throughout the course of the year. But here already is a sampling from an interim benchmark in the fall to an interim benchmark in the spring that we're already seeing increases in reading and math in each of our Achievement Zone schools. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get there. Now we're zooming into Jones. We're going to highlight 3 campuses out of the 9. But one of the things that's important to articulate on this infographic is the gray line here is MISD schools as a collective, and then you have the blue and the green that are highlighting Jones specifically. What's important and what we want to see is we don't only want to see that gap close between MISD schools and our Achievement Zone schools, but we also want to see that we're exceeding that, but also with all of MISD at the same time. And that's what we're hoping to see too at the end of the year. So we can already see some of these gaps that are already closing with Jones. And with that being said, I'm going to call up Principal Aaron and Ms. Sanchez to talk a little bit about that work.
Dr. Queer, I do have a quick question, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So you said all of our campuses has a literacy strategist?
Yes, sir.
And so is that what each campus strategist, is that all they do at each campus each day, or do they have other assignments?
Their primary goal is literacy, and I'm glad that we're joined by Ms. Sanchez because she can highlight that question specifically around what the core role is. But that role, to your question, for all of our campuses should remain the same, but it's going to look a little more prescribed and tailored for the Achievement Zone because they're doing their work is a little more intensive.
Okay.
And one more question. Of the 10 schools highlighted, as Achievement Zone. What is the overlap with opportunity culture? How many of the same campuses are opportunity culture that are also Achievement Zone? Is it all of them?
That's a good question. I know we're joined by Mr. Hightower, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe
I know that's a very specific off the top of your head.
that is. I believe we have 3 or 4 campuses that are already OC, and part of the 5. I'm sorry, and part of the OC strategy moving into year 2 is that all the Achievement Zone schools starting in year 2 will be an opportunity culture campus.
Opportunity culture. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You reached to the next thing that I was curious about. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Board President Murray, school board members, and also Superintendent Ramsey. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to join you today. And just a special thank you to Mr. Bishop, who visited Jones Elementary last month. It was so exciting for you to go into the classrooms with us and see the work that we are doing. So thank you so much. As an Achievement Zone campus, I would like to highlight some of the things that are happening at Jones Elementary. First, I would like to just use one word to describe the work that is happening through Achievement Zone, and that word is hope. Our students, our staff, our families, our hardworking teachers, they see hope. As we're looking at our data, and not just every month, but we are constantly having data meetings as a result of the Achievement Zone and the learning that we are participating in. And we are seeing the results, and of course we will highlight some of those with you today. As we're participating in the Achievement Zone, there are 3 consistent patterns that we are experiencing. First is appreciation. The Achievement Zone team coming into our campuses and actually learning how to identify with us, asking questions and finding out who we are as leaders and what is actually going on our campuses is a great benefit that we are experiencing as a part of the Achievement Zone. The appreciation, having conversations with them about our strengths, as well as areas that we need to grow in, has been great for our students first, and then for our teachers on our campus. Second of all, we are participating in coaching. It has been a great experience for us as leaders, as well as teacher teams in professional learning communities to actually be coached. And it's like real-time coaching that we are experiencing on our campuses. Not only am I going into classrooms with my team, but we also have Achievement Zone staff persons that are visiting our campuses on a regular basis. It feels like they are a part of our community there at Jones Elementary because they are there quite frequently. Not only that, but we are participating in professional development, and I believe that it was mentioned earlier that it is differentiated. So we have trainings that are related to the areas that we are trying to grow in. And thirdly is evaluation. We are involved in evaluating. We know our data. We know our teachers, our hardworking teachers, because we are in the classrooms with them to see the great work that they are doing. We do real-time coaching with our teachers. So if we go into a classroom, we make it a point to do a glow with those teachers. And then we also ask questions that are going to lead us to higher data with our students. And at this time, I would love for Ms. Sanchez, who is our literacy strategist, she is going to share some information with you. But one last thought, and then I'll come back and answer any questions that you have. For Simon Sinek, who is one of the gurus in school leadership, he talks about school leadership being like falling in love. Of course, we normally don't talk about falling in love at a school board meeting, but I want you to hear this analogy. If we are going to fall in love with someone, then it's not a one-time event. It is several events that lead up to that, and all of a sudden we realize that we are in love. In our school leadership, it's not a one-time event that is happening on our campuses, but it is a continuous work that is happening with our teams, with our teachers, with our families that is bringing about true school leadership, and we are seeing the results of that. So at this time, I would like for our amazing literacy strategist to share some information with you.
Good evening, President Murray, the board, and Dr. Ramsey. My name is Lacey Sanchez, and I am the literacy strategist at Joan Elementary. I am here today to attest to the positive impact that LLI and the Achievement Zone has had on my campus. Our experience started in October when LLI did their first walkthroughs with us, and they were very collaborative and very informative. We had a feedback session, and we were told what we were doing well, but possible solutions in areas we needed to grow. We were given a level of autonomy to utilize our curricular resources, establish a campus-level CIA planning day, and focus on standards and specificity rather than the previous guides from years prior. Our K-2 teachers did a fabulous job of looking at resources, being open-minded, and going all in. This jump allowed teachers to align their literacy block, and our students began to grow. And we saw evidence of this in our whole group lessons, as well as our guided reading groups. There was also very in-depth trainings held by the LLI team to ensure a greater understanding of the literacy framework components. This helped me as a strategist better understand what the expectations were and how to support my team. I also really appreciate the follow-up walkthroughs that occurred on our campus as well. They allowed for that collaborative and informative piece. It allowed for us to show off the goals that we had reached, but also gave us new goals to strive for and things to consider. The Achievement Zone also has scheduled monthly meetings, and upon attendance, I appreciated the focus on what's going well at these campuses because we have great teachers and there are great things happening. What I also appreciated about it was the training available and how it was easily applicable and turnkey. These training sessions have grown our leadership team at Jones and allowed us to have a more cohesive unit. It also allows us to build a network of schools with similar interests and goals in an area of collaboration versus an area of isolation. These are my personal experiences with Achievement Zone and LLI and its positive impact. Thank you for your time and your service.
And I am here to answer any questions that you all may have about Jones Elementary. I would like to point out for our kinder through second grade students, our campus goal is 75% of those students will be on level before they go to the next grade level. And I can tell you we are well on the way. We are going to achieve 75% or even higher. When we looked at our release test for STAR, we had some strong points. We had some grade levels that were doing well. And in fifth grade for reading and for math, we had 84% and 70% of those students that were doing well and showing that they were going to reach that goal. We also had some other hot spots that we are working on. But you need to know that we are in those classrooms. We even hold weekly data meetings with some teachers to help support them in the work that they are doing in the classroom. We have professional development that is also supporting those teachers so that those students will be successful. I cannot say enough about the hardworking teachers and the teacher teams that we have at Jones Elementary. And we are here to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't have any questions. I would just like to say, hearing that your feeling is hope is so invigorating. And the two words that I wrote down in response to your presentation was passionate and exciting. So thank you for your passion, and thank you for working so hard. And hopefully here's to a really strong finish.
Our kids are worth it. Thank you.
Mr. Murray, having the opportunity to visit Jones and to go into the classrooms and to see the teachers engage with the students and see students that are learning and willing to learn and asking questions is a breath of fresh air that Ms. Aaron was speaking on. So I believe that of turning the corner, if you will, that the student engagement as well as the teachers teaching I think we'll continue to see student achievement taking place at Jones. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to go into the classrooms and see the teachers teaching and students learning.
Thank you, Ms. Harrod and Ms. Sanchez. We appreciate your work.
And one of the things they did not mention is I'm actually also a designated sub at Jones. I'm really proud of their hard work. This next slide here, jumping into our next school that we're going to highlight, is Peace. We see here on this slide, which is really nothing short of remarkable, that Peace is seeing some extraordinary gains that is already accelerating past the district average in the achievement zone. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and call up Principal Salgado, who's going to talk about the work that's happening in Peace and how they are achieving these remarkable things for kids.
Good evening, President Murray, honorable school board members, Dr. Ramsey. I am Gabriel Salgado. I am school principal at Peace Communications and Technology Academy. It's always hard to speak after Miss Aaron because she's a wonderful speaker and she's a wonderful leader. I actually admire her. But first of all, I wanted to talk about Peace. At Peace, our mission is to inspire and nurture our children to become the future leaders of the world. And the word inspire has a lot of meaning for us at Peace. Along with these lines, we knew that this year, and that it was extremely important to work on our school culture in order to be able to inspire our children. And by school culture, I mean children, I mean parents, and I mean staff members and administrators. Part of our work this year has a lot to do with the culture. And we have been involved in developing our school core values alongside with our school cultural tenets. And not only that, but we make a special time to celebrate as our staff members and our children are demonstrating and exhibiting these cultural tenets and core values. We take the time to celebrate them for our students. We have positive office referrals. The teachers write an office referral, a good one, and send the students when they have, exhibited one of these cultural tenets. Aside from that, because we're a communications magnet, we have a TV news show. In the TV news show, we, display the students that have been exhibiting this particular cultural tenets. For the teachers, we celebrate them every single staff meeting. We have teachers that we celebrate as they exhibit some of these cultural tenets, and they get a special badge that is also outside of their classroom doors. Without boring you too much with all of the details, I am happy to say that based on our interim assessment, Peace is showing a probability of 81% of our students showing growth as measured by the TEA, STAR test. And all this has been possible because of the commitment and the tenacity of our staff members, and also because of the support that we receive from the District Service Center. As a principal of an achievement zone school, we have been blessed with professional development, with support from the LLI team, with Engage to Learn coaching that the district has provided for us, and many other things. And as the saying says, it takes a village. And really, I think that our District Service Center has taken that to heart by creating this achievement zone for us principals that really need the support. So I want to say thank you for that. Thank you, Dr. Ramsey, for that. Thank you. Any questions?
I was going to hold my comment to the end, but I'm glad to see your presentations. I know we have one more, but to hear that communication is going on with y'all and our district center is and to see the numbers that are moving, it's highly impressive. So, as board members, I try to make it clear that I'm not the subject expert matter. Y'all are, and that, we're here to support y'all, obviously, as best as we can as board members in a sense, but at the end of the day, it's going to be your team, the boots on the ground that resolves and improves those kids and moves forward. So, just wanted to say that I'm listening to the comments, and listening to what you're saying about how you're communicating. So, because, it's going to take individual, if it works over there, it might not work over here. So, and education's like that. Every time we try to set an obstacle for it, in a sense, it doesn't work, because that's not the way education works. The mind, to grow the mind is something very unique, and it's up to you, to your individual teams, to figure that out for each campus, in a sense. So, thank you.
Mr. Salgado, great. We appreciate your work too. It's fabulous work, and the graph shows tremendous outcomes, and we're excited about what is going on in your school with our students. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I don't want to underscore the value of all of our leaders and staff that are working extremely hard in our buildings, really moving the needle for our kids, and just really want to again put an exclamation point by the work that they're doing. So just really quick, we talked a little bit about some of these things moving into year 2. Really looking at expanding the opportunity culture. Ms. Joyner, you asked that question, so we talked a little bit about that. Looking and one big critical human capital support that we are adding through Title is adding a math interventionist position at each of our achievement zone schools. So really having that literacy support and that math support, which we do remember from the presentation in December. Statewide we saw the most regression in mathematics than we did in reading, and so we're really excited about the additional supports that we're going to be moving into for year 2. And with that being said, any questions?
All right, hearing them. Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All that your team is doing, and I know a lot of them are here today, and we thanked them last week at one of our special meetings, but you guys are doing great work, and we appreciate all the work happening at the District Service Center. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, President Murray. Thank you, members of the board, for your support.
Good evening, Board President Murray, Board of Trustees, Dr. Ramsey, and Mr. Pounds. I'm Dr. Josefa Davila, Executive Director, and I have Jeff Horner, Executive Director, and Misty. They're going to be presenting with me. MISD Summer Intersession comprehensively addresses board goals 1, 2, 3, and 4. We continue to provide opportunities for students to receive personalized small group accelerated instruction that will be customized around student strengths and areas identified as targets of growth. Our principals and teachers will use data from MAP end of year, spring interim assessment, teacher feedback, course subject grades for reading and math, and end of course assessment results to make these instructional and student support decisions. The teachers will be provided with an 8-hour day of planning and training and a daily 60-minute conference time during the summer intersession to plan for differentiated and targeted instruction based on the student needs. The metrics we will use to measure student summer growth will be a second round of the MAP end-of-year results, credit attainment, and end-of-course passing rates. Here we have our Achieve Intercessions at a glance. We had one in the fall, one in the spring, and one coming in the summer. Our attendance has averaged approximately 4,500 students per intercession, with a slightly higher attendance percentage in the spring. We serve students 4 days in October and 4 days in February, targeting reading and math, core subject grades, specifically reading and math, end of course exams, and credit recovery. Our summer intersession is the most comprehensive instructional model that MISD has provided in recent years. We have planned for 16 days and serving a projected average daily attendance of over 4,400 students.
Evening, President Murray, trustees, Dr. Ramsey. Just for clarification, we will bring up Principal Ring. We're going to save her for the academic update for the board goals, though. So going through intercession, continuing, you'll see here on the slides, summer intercession has been clustered at these different sites. So we have 4 elementary sites. Each one of these has 6 additional elementaries attending. So we're clustering in order to maximize efficiency for summer intercession. So Bunch, Fannin, Jones, and Scarborough will host the 4 elementary sites. That was based basically on transportation in order to make sure transportation is available for eligible students. Alamo and San Jacinto will each serve as a feeder school site for the 7th and 8th grade program. And then Midland High School and Legacy High School will each serve a 9 through 12 summer intercession site. So summer intercession will be provided by a robust number of over 300 staff members, 300 teachers that is, using 5 distinct session models. So the bilingual pre-K program will serve those students specifically, and that will be housed at Bunch. The elementary pre-K through 6 across all elementary campuses, all of our elementary campuses. The junior high program, as I mentioned already, at Alamo and SJ, and then high school 9 through 12. And then the last, not least, is the extended school year program that I'll go into just a little bit down the line. So very specifically, invitation for K-8 will include the criteria of grades. Quite literally, less than 70 on the 4 core average is going to be the primary audience for K-8. Followed by, there'll be second to that will be students that hadn't met standards in either math or the English language arts, as evidenced by teacher assessments such as common formative assessments, summative assessments. We'll use NWA MAP data, and we'll also use the interim data you heard the Achievement Zone schools speak just a little bit about. 9 through 12 will serve all core subjects around the end of course exam, so the 5 end of course exam subjects. 9 through 12 will be very specifically focused on end of course exam retakes during the summer, as well as credit recovery. Finally, serving students that are at risk of not graduating. One of the things I want to add, we will have at each elementary site, we'll have at minimum 1 pre-K section, so we'll be serving pre-K to the largest capacity possible, starting with that, and we'll expand as necessary. And we're excited to be able to offer that. So we've mentioned this, but this is the most robust, in my experience, definitely in the service at the service center that we've ever offered for summer intercession. Of course, it goes over 3 weeks for the high school, and that's specifically around retesting in the middle of June, and then 4 weeks for K-8. So I mentioned pre-K just a minute. So pre-K and K students will be by invitation based on levels of performance as emerging bilinguals. Extended school year would be based on invitation. That's going through the admission review and dismissal. The ARD committee actually makes those decisions for extended school year. The timeline for invitations, because we're looking at grades, so we're already talking about what students are at risk, and we're running lists and having these conversations with beginning to have these conversations with parents now, especially, but invitations will go out May 11th, because we're really looking at grades primarily as being a requirement to attend. I'd like to open it up to questions.
Mr. Skiddy? Mr. Horner, can you go back one slide?
Yes, sir.
The pyramid. Does summer intercession addressed, or is it addressed separately, not necessarily credit recovery, but attendance recovery? I know we've had a lot of conversation as a board about attendance issues.
Absolutely. So specifically, attendance
Just wasn't
recovery as
listed,
it
I'm sure.
relates to credits. So once attendance gets to a certain point, students are denied credit in high school credit courses. And so that would dictate the 9 through 12 credit recovery piece. So they would be denied credit, which goes back to credit. With that said, there is some level of attendance component in decision-making around students in the K-8 grades as well. So they're students that are at risk of retention based on lack of attending school, definitely are targeted for intercession.
So it really is a credit recovery issue.
For 9 through 12, it is absolutely a credit recovery issue because they've been denied credit. K-8, it is an attendance issue. You're exactly right to point that out. And so attendance has a factor in invitations. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I only have one question. In the day we'll run, it'll be a 4-day week, just like our other intercessions. And then what will the schedule look like? What is arrival and departure?
So we are running the 4-day week, just like the other intercessions. The difference is we are not necessarily running a full day. We are running 4-hour sessions, and so teachers have some supervision time, but each teacher will have a full hour of planning time on top of that. So they'll have ample time for planning. I should mention also the support piece for the teachers. We'll bring teachers in the week before for a full 8-hour day of training. We're looking at different pieces for the support for lessons and the actual week at a glance by week, and planning for that intercession.
So what time will students arrive and be dismissed?
So our start time will be the same start time as normal. So 8:40 for secondary and 7:45 for elementary.
And then what time do they get out? Noon?
4 hours after that, and I didn't have to bring
Nobody's
that from
sleeping
you.
in on that summer intercession. Okay, thank you.
It's a great question.
Is,
Do you have the exact times here if you'd like?
You might have said it already, but when does it start? Is it going to start as soon as the school's over with? Memorial Day? That day after?
So Memorial Day will begin a 4-day window that will actually we'll finalize building the master schedule, finalize the student enrollment. So June 7th is the actual start date. So the week after will be when we start intercession.
So is it Dr. Josefa Davila and yourself overseeing the summer intercession?
Yes, sir. We're directly involved. We will have a site administrator that we bring in specifically for each one of those sites. So each site will have a site administrator. We'll have campus assignments with administration teams on those campuses, and then we're definitely going to be knee-deep.
Well, I want to say kudos because I think you're, both of you and Dr. Ramsey and the district were coming up with the elementary pre-K and the pre-K bilingual portion of it. I can't remember that had functioned before, and I think that it's just a wonderful thing to engage the community early during the summer, the ones that can apply and attend and get the student population rolling and thinking, and I just think it's a fabulous idea, and I can't wait to see the results of it. Like I said, I just think it's very innovative what's going on there. So, thank you. And like I said, I'm sure it's a shared success with y'all. But thank you for doing that. I mean, I think that's going to be powerful. So,
We appreciate the statements, Mr. Marquez. Just this slideshow gave us the opportunity to highlight the pre-K bilingual program. We have offered it prior to this, but this gives us a chance to really talk through it for trustees as well as community, knowing that's an opportunity.
well, the word intersection, I think, and I could be completely wrong about this, but the word intersection versus summer school, I think it goes over well in the sense of once people, you know, I'm sure you heard all the comments we've had over the discussion we've had over the last couple of years of the intersection, and now that we've gone through it and seen a lot of positive out of it, I think that this is another positive that'll continue to grow the system. So.
All right, thank you guys. We appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 6D, district reports. A, superintendent update. B, board committee report. C, innovation update. D, staffing update. Board, are there any reason why any of these items ought to be pulled or questions asked? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item C, discussion action items. A, academic update, board goals. And presenters, Dr. Martinez and Dr. Davia. And looks like Misty Ring.
Good evening, President Murray, members of the board, Dr. Ramsey. On behalf of the Learning, Leading, and Innovation Department, I am delighted to present to you Lone Star Governance Goal Progress Measure 4.1. I am accompanied by Dr. Davila, Executive Director of LLI, and of course, our proud principal of Midland Freshman, Mitzi Ring. Board Progress Measure 4.1 states, oops, I guess I gotta do this, right. States that the percentage of first-year freshmen leaving grade 9 with an Algebra 1 credit will increase from 86% to 91% by August 2023. The current end-of-the-year target for 2022 is actually 90%. As our data shows, and you have it in front of you, the first year grade 9 Algebra 1 credits earned so far for the middle of the year, and that is in December, it's 87% for both schools combined. The end of the year target is 90%. So we are on track to meeting the end of the year goal target. And now I will allow Dr. Davila to continue with the forward thinking.
Good evening once again, Board President Murray, Board of Trustees, Dr. Ramsey, and Mr. Pounds. Forward thinking, the LLI team created an Algebra 1 targeted spiral resource for teachers to implement into the instruction as a form of increasing frequency with targeted TEKs, but with different deepening of complexity. The usage of curriculum spirals lead to better long-term mastery of facts, skills, and concepts. Therefore, we have ensured that the content is rigorous and requires students to apply knowledge while creating an additional opportunity for teachers to lead this instruction, student partner work, and individual work. Campuses are also providing small group pullouts based on map data, formative assessments, teacher recommendations for acceleration, and enriched instruction. School leaders are supporting algebra teachers by providing professional development and having the multi-class room leaders model lessons and co-teach with algebra teachers. Algebra teachers participated in the Region 18 end of course review for Algebra 1 and have been provided with state resources that have engaged students in problem-solving situations, vocabulary development, retention of skills, and concepts. Teachers also participated in the best practices training provided by the LLI team. Teachers are tracking the learning of their students by using multiple assessment measures to determine individualized student goals such as map data, spring interim assessments, and common formative assessments created during POCs, carefully aligning the level of cognitive rigor, learning targets, and standards. The LLI team trained the school leaders, that includes principals and assistant principals, in the 6 steps of effective feedback adapted from Leverage Leadership. The 6 steps of effective feedback process ensures teachers are receiving targeted feedback with a high leverage action step that is bite-sized in order to implement immediately to improve instruction. Now, Misty Ring.
Good evening, Board President Murray and trustees and Dr. Ramsey. This evening, I'm honored to highlight our work to increase the graduation rate, the high school graduation rate, specifically that of our Algebra 1 team. These dedicated teachers share my commitment to grow our PLC team so that we may help our students thrive. They intentionally engage in the PLC process, and they are not afraid to refine their systems. We here often talk about putting student needs before adult conveniences, and these teachers live that out. They collaborate daily. They learn together to ensure that more of our students get what they need the first time around through Tier 1 instruction. And when students need more time and support, they have a plan to meet students where they are and to help them get where they need to be. That involves breaking down assessment data by student and by standard, and it also means focusing on goals. Of course, our teachers won't be satisfied until all of our students are learning at high levels. But when it comes to a formal Algebra 1 goal, we're aiming for 96% of our students to earn that credit. That maintains our performance from 20 to 21, and it still exceeds the district benchmark. In so many ways, 9th grade is a transition year for our students, and most of them struggle to grasp the importance of credits, that promotion isn't the key to graduation. That's why our faculty and staff knowing our goals and monitoring our progress toward them is so important. In addition to grade monitoring during the cycle, we look at our passing rates after each cycle in comparison to past years and in relation to our annual goal. Our administrative team compiles that data so our teachers can spend their time and energy responding to what they see. During Mrs. Torres's tenure at Midland Freshman, we began empowering our teacher teams to help students recover credits before those credits were truly lost. We didn't then, and we don't now, want to rely on A+ once our students get over to Midland High School. Our teachers design plans for students with varied levels of support. Some of our students struggle during a particular cycle, and they can complete some teacher-designed modules in order to recover that piece. Others require more monitoring and more individualized support during advisory. For the first time this year, we were able to utilize intercession, where numerous students told me that they benefited from additional time in that smaller academic environment. I want to reiterate that I am incredibly grateful for our teachers and the work that they do for our students. They are our #1 resource. This year, I provided additional support to them to help us recenter around the 4 critical questions, which is what we use to guide our PLC work. This was important after all the bending and twisting we all had to do in response to the pandemic. We continue to prioritize our Algebra 1's team time every day, and we have invested additional time and support for teacher needs through opportunity culture. As a principal, I appreciate this particular goal progress measure because it places focus on an area which mounds of research has said is critical to student success, and one in which, in turn, is central to our campus accountability. Thanks for your time this evening.
Subject to your questions.
This is it's a question, but it's for our superintendent here. But as we talk about it, because I heard the word pandemic in there, my fear is that as we're I don't know if it's official or unofficial, but we're heading out of the pandemic. The term's been used a lot now, in a sense, but the fact of the matter is that I like the superintendent to comment on it. But the fact of the matter is that we're not out of the pandemic, and I don't know the discussions I've heard and about the time that's still involved because there was a learning loss, and it just didn't come back this year, and so there's a differential in the fact that where a student was, where a student should be, but where they're actually at now. So can you speak just a little bit to that
Sure.
Our community needs to understand that it's not over. We're still in the trenches as you're discussing.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to clarify that the recovery from the pandemic is multi-year. The losses that we saw nationwide, statewide, and here in MISD, we're going to do our best. Every single teacher every day works towards providing a year's growth in that school year. But we have students that slid multi-years. And so the spiral and review that typically happens of the standards, of the TEKS in a school year, it's a little more complicated than that, because if I'm a classroom teacher at 5th grade, I may have to be very familiar with 3rd grade TEKS, with 4th grade TEKS, so that I know where our students have gaps to get them there. As campus leaders, they're working really, really hard on fully understanding how to support their staff with this kind of new way of teaching, where we're looking at not only a year's growth, but we're asking for miracles. And we need to continue being loud and clear that every school and probably the world needs some grace, because teachers are tired, teachers are working really, really hard, and they're doing some amazing things, but it's not going to happen in a 6-month time frame. The reason that the federal government gave us ESSER funds over 3 years was because there was a full understanding that at a minimum, if the pandemic had ended last year, it would take 3 years to recover. We know this year we've been interrupted several times with different variants. Our attendance is very low. And so it's going to take us probably more than those 3 years, but this team works on that every day. When we talk about planning in the long term and being strategic, we're looking at that. We're looking at that data to see how schools are doing today as opposed to yesterday, and where they can go tomorrow. And so we know we're in it for the long game. We have to continuously look at what improvement is, but it's going to be a multi-year process to fully recover what was in Texas 7 years of lost learning time in math. And what was it for reading? 4, I think, something like that. You're not going to make that up in 1 year.
And right. No, and I appreciate the clarification and the superintendent's guidance on this, because it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And we have to help our teachers understand that perhaps in no other time in the history of education, differentiation and scaffolding has become so relevant and so imperative for us to address those gaps. And it resonates with a conversation I was having with one of the principals I supervise, and I know Charlie does this as well with the principals that he oversees, that teachers need to understand the TEKs that come before and the TEKs that are after, so that they can learn to scaffold, to spiral that information, rather than say, well, they didn't get this from the third grade, and I may be teaching fourth grade, so I got to teach this at the third grade level. No, they have to teach it as scaffolded within the fourth grade TEKs, without forgetting that that's a gap that they have. And that takes skill, it takes training, and our entire department is committed to ensuring that our MTSS and our TI processes are supporting that charge. And so we are aware of the challenge that we have, and our heart is with the teachers that are working so hard, that are so tired at this point, but we need to show them a different way. So it's a paradigm shift that we have to help them understand. You're working hard. We have to continue to help you to work smarter, right? And they're been working smarter, but this is a different reality, and we have to confront it with a different set of rules, different approaches. And so our entire department is committed to that charge. And make no mistake about it, we are living this challenge with the teachers and pivoting as much as we need to in order to support them in the classrooms.
A motion by Mr. Trischetti to accept the report.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bishop. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is item 7B, discussion and possible action on Lone Star Governance Board goal updates and corresponding changes to the board policy AE local. Dr. Cuellar?
Members of the board, just coming back here to resurface the work session that was held on April 2nd regarding the Lone Star governance. The board did provide very specific feedback regarding next steps. So we are here with you, here before you, for the board's approval and acceptance of the new Lone Star governance board goals.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion? And I do want to point out that we did spend a Saturday together going over these, so for the community to know that the whole board attended virtually a meeting to go over these board goals and identify, working with the LLI team, on what we thought were stretch goals, but also what were realistic and what we could achieve. And so we think we have a good slate of goals here, important percentages that will help us reach where we want to be. And then also adding, I know one of the things we added this year was a constraint also to help us reach some of the things we learned in the last board meeting about how we address our TSI shortfalls and that sort of thing. And so I appreciate the work. Any discussion or any questions about the updates to the goals? Okay, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Cuellar.
so much, board.
Item 7C is discussion and possible action to approve resolution renewal of YWLA partnership agreement. Mrs. Ware, welcome to the podium.
Good evening, President Murray, trustees, Dr. Ramsey, and Mr. Pounds. I'm here to present on item 7C, the renewal of the 1882 partner agreement with the Young Women's Leadership Academy. In 2019, Midland ISD partnered with the Young Women's Preparatory Network to open the Young Women's Leadership Academy. The district's current 3-year Senate Bill 1882 partnership agreement with YWLA will expire on June 30th, 2022. Based on a review of the academic, financial, and organizational performance of YWLA, the district's administration recommends the board renew the agreement to continue the district's partnership with YWLA.
I move.
We have a motion by Mr. Marquez.
Second.
Okay. We have a second by Mr. Davis. Ms. Ware? Did you want to finish?
I was just going to say that the adoption of the proposed resolution will renew the 1882 partner agreement for a term of 5 years to expire on June 30th of 2027.
That was going to be my question, went through when?
We have a motion and a second. Board, is there any discussion? Any
Yeah,
questions?
I do have so is this going to be considered their permanent home? Washington.
You're saying for the continuation of the contract
Yes.
we would be considering for tonight.
Yes.
It's my understanding that it would be there through our 5-year renewal.
And I guess my next question is, I know it was talked about during the process of the name. Is it going to be Young Women's Leadership Academy at Washington?
Booker T. Washington.
Booker T. Washington, excuse me. Okay.
So Washington's coming first.
Correct.
And that's listed here, the way that we are approving it?
Just make sure that language reflects that.
Yeah, what do we need to do, Sid, in terms of a motion to ensure that is the language?
So that was approved by the board at a prior board meeting.
Okay.
This vote here is to approve a resolution to extend.
Just to renew.
To renew the agreement for a term of 5 years.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ware. Thank you for being short-winded. Item 7D, discussion and possible action item on policy update, FFAC local wellness and health service medical treatment. Welcome, Ms. Douglas.
Thank you. Good evening, President Murray, Board of Trustees, Dr. Ramsey, and Mr. Pounds. I have a couple of slides if you need to see them. If not, I can give you a snapshot. Okay, we've proposed that we add Narcan stock to our medication availability, and that would require a change to the FFAC. The drug landscape has changed. Opioid poisonings are on the rise. I want to make sure that the community understands this is not a situation of our students seeking out opioid-containing illicit or street drugs, but they are being mixed into almost every street drug that the DEA and our law enforcement officers are encountering. You've heard about fentanyl on the news. A microscopic dose of that can be fatal, and the DEA just issued a memo warning individuals and the population about the danger of opioid overdose or poisoning, which is what it is, because our students or our community don't realize that this is an ingredient in something that they're seeking out for recreational use. Also, opioid overdose treatment is being prescribed for patients who take opioids for prescribed reasons, for cancer treatment, for long-term pain control. We have community members across the board who receive opioid medications for different reasons. Our average EMS response time in the community right now is about 4 minutes. Brain death can occur in 3 to 5. So Narcan is the standard of care. It is an easy to administer, safe and effective nasal spray that treats opioid overdose or poisoning. It's currently grant funded. In the future, we don't know if that will be the case, but the proposal is to have our school nurses and our law enforcement officers trained and to have the stock medication on hand in the event that we need it for an emergency. Other staff members can be trained if they choose to.
We have a motion by Mr. Trischetti. I get a second. Second by Mr. Davis. Mr. Marcos.
Grant funded till when?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Grant funded till when?
We don't know the end of the grant funding. There's been a high demand for it because we've seen cases go up across the nation.
I do want to mention that this presentation was given at the Safety Committee meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Myself, Mr. Trischetti, and Mr. Davis attended,
Yes.
along with the chief, and had full-scale approval in that committee. So the one thing I would like you to just mention, the adverse effects if we gave it to the wrong person.
The adverse effects of administering Narcan are essentially the equivalent of a head cold. It doesn't cause any damage to the individual, and it doesn't really have any effect if their overdose situation is not due to an opioid. So it's only effective on those medications or on those ingredients which we are seeing higher levels of, we'll call it what it is, opioid poisoning. The other piece of the FFAC update includes a proposal to add stock albuterol to our nurses' offices. That would only be given to students who have a diagnosis of asthma with parent permission. It is highly recommended by the leading organizations and by our medical director, who is the local asthma and allergy specialist.
Any further discussion, Mr. Bishop?
Yeah, I do have a question. So I guess during this training with nurses and whomever on staff that wants to participate, is there going to be some, I guess during this training, they'll be able to recognize when an individual is under this type of influence?
Absolutely. And our protocol, our standing order or standing protocol that has been signed by our medical advisor gives specific, easy to understand civilian language about what an opioid high versus an opioid overdose or poisoning looks like.
And so this will be kept in the nurse's office under nurse's care and locked?
It won't be kept locked. Just like any other emergency medication, we want it to be easy access and rapidly available. Our law enforcement officers would carry it with them, and they would carry 2 doses. Our nurses' offices would be stocked with 2 doses.
And is this for every campus?
This is for every campus because we know that, from a street drug use, fentanyl at this point is being mixed in all sorts of things. And we see use from community members to students. We have not had any incidents of opioid overdose at this point, and we are trying to stay ahead of what we're seeing current trends, both locally and nationally.
I know it's a crazy question, but does this stuff have a shelf life?
That's a good question. The shelf life on the stock Narcan that we currently have available has a shelf life of 2 years. So when you look at the proposed expense for the district, if the grant funding isn't a factor in play, that might be every other year. We just we can't guarantee the shelf life past a year with Narcan orders.
So I mean, so you said it's a spray, right?
Yes, it's a nasal spray.
So it does have a seal on it. So once, I guess it's kind of like an eye-wash bottle. So once the seal is broken, does it have to be disposed of?
It does not. They come in foil packs,
Okay.
and once you pop that foil pack, as long as the nasal spray has not been administered, you can still use that.
Okay.
It doesn't result in the expiration or need to throw the drug away.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a motion by Mr. Triscati and a second by Mr. Davis to approve the proposed changes to FFAC local. Any other discussion?
Is there any type of sign-off that a parent has to sign before they say that I want this administered to my child or anything? Is there any kind of?
For the stock albuterol, yes. For the Narcan administration, no, because that is akin to an emergency procedure, just like we would use an AED.
Okay.
In the event that a child's life is in danger or a staff member's life is in danger, as first responders and healthcare providers,
Okay.
we can provide that care. And in the legislation that addresses this, there's protection for
Like the Good Samaritan?
staff members. Yes, and also for our licensed individuals, our law enforcement officers, and our licensed nurses. There's heavy protection in there because the benefit of this is so high compared to any risk.
Okay, now you spoke on the police officer and the nurse. What about the teacher's aide or someone else that's in the office that's not in that category of a nurse or an officer that chooses to participate? How are they protected?
So the legislation in Texas for schools for open stock specifies that staff members need to be trained in order to administer it. We would require every nurse and every law enforcement officer to be trained in the administration, just like our Stop the Bleed protocols. And then we would open up that invitation and provide training to staff members who wanted that
So they would be
on a
covered.
case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So other staff members can be trained
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
If there's no other discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you. It's 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7E, we will pull from the agenda now and place it under actions arising from closed session. We need to consult with our attorney just quickly on that. So we will move on to item 7F, discussion and possible action item to approve resolution, Idea Travis 8th grade expansion. Ms. Ware?
Mr. Murray, I do believe we have a couple of public comments, if they're still here.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Ms. Solis would like to speak on item 7F. My apologies.
Good catch.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Bethany Solis, the Executive Director for Idea Public Schools here in the Permian Basin. And nothing in my career has brought me as much pride and satisfaction as our collaborative partnership to transform Travis Elementary. 3 years ago, IDEA's board, MISD's board unanimously approved our partnership contract. And together, we committed to making sure that Travis students and families have an excellent school choice in their very own neighborhood, one that prepares any and every child, no matter their background, their family income, their past academic history, for success in college and beyond. Idea Public Schools' most recent graduating class of 2021 is a reminder of what is potentially down the road for Travis students. 99% of more than 1,300 IDEA seniors last year enrolled in college this past fall. That included 29 students in IDEA Thrive, our 18-plus special education program. The 10 seniors who didn't immediately enroll in college pursued other meaningful and important experiences, including the military, full-time faith-based missions, or entering the workforce directly. These same life-changing post-secondary outcomes are what we are also working toward year after year here at Travis. Let me tell you a tiny bit about our current 7th graders, next year's, hopefully, 8th graders. And Monica Hernandez shared a little bit about them. Almost 70% of them live in the Travis attendance zone. 77% qualify for free and reduced meals. And as she shared, they have made some really incredible growth. During the 2021 school year, in spite of the nationwide declines in academic achievement due to COVID, this class averaged just over 1 grade level growth in reading and a mind-boggling over 2 grade levels of growth in math in just 1 school year. This was on the Renaissance Star Exam, a nationally norm reference test very similar to the NWA MAP. This year, when we reported our middle of the year data, our 7th graders were on track to average 1.4 years of growth in reading and 1.5 years of growth in math by the end of this May. 83% of this year's middle schoolers, 6th and 7th graders, achieved their state-provided 2-year growth goal on the STAR exam last year. Our middle schoolers are growing and improving in really remarkable ways, a testament to the hard work they and their teachers and families put in every day. However, while their growth is astounding, many, too many, are still not yet on grade level. They need more time to grow even further and close the academic gaps that so many of them have experienced for so many years. For this reason, we hope to offer 8th grade next year at Travis to continue to serve our oldest class of students along their path to college. And I very much hope you'll each vote to support this expansion for our students. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Mr. Reagan Hinojos, and he would also like to speak on item 7F, IDEA. Welcome.
Good evening, President Murray, members of the board, Dr. Ramsey, Mr. Council. I've often been criticized for being supportive of the board, so it's difficult for me to speak tonight because I'm disappointed with some members of the board because of the consternation and considering secondary grade levels for IDEA schools. To be clear, I'm a member of the advisory board for IDEA Permian Basin, and I've served in that capacity for almost 2 years since it was voted in by some of the members of this current board. And to be frank, I was very disappointed when the board made this partnership happen, and it had nothing to do with the IDEA schools. I witnessed a presentation by Bethany Solis because my daughter was attending UTPB STEM Academy because the schools in my district and her neighborhood had a history of low academic achievement. Bethany Solis' presentation at UTPB was solid, and so is IDEA's track record. It wasn't IDEA's schools that I was upset with. It was the fact that my childhood elementary school and the children of that school were given away to academic failure. I have heard the argument that we are giving our schools away, when the truth is, before we entered into a partnership with IDEA, we had given away our schools and children to academic failure. And this is what many have complained over the past couple of years about this board, that we have a record of academic decline for more than a decade, which I believe Mr. Hodges mentioned earlier today. So I was perplexed in conversations with the chairman of PSP, members of other foundations who have been supportive of MISD and charter schools and 1882 partnerships and the work that we're doing here. And I've served on this advisory board with IDEA because I was not going to allow that school to go underserved, and I was going to make sure that they fulfilled their promise of academic results. So I'm asking MISD to fulfill their promise as well, because there's still things that still matter here in Midland, Texas, like honoring your word, accepting an invitation to speak face-to-face and have candid conversations, and rolling your sleeves up, getting your hands dirty to make your community better. So I'm asking that you honor the request for secondary grades because they've honored their obligations.
Mr. Nohos, before you leave, I have a couple questions just because of what you just said. When has the board not addressed secondary needs? Because I don't think that's on the agenda tonight, and so I'm not sure it's fair to our public for you to make those comments whenever that hasn't been addressed by this board.
No, in conversations that I've had with stakeholders, that there was perhaps members that were considering not approving secondary grade levels for IDEA.
And you understand those reasons?
I understand the reasons.
Okay.
My reasons were they fulfilled their obligations, and they were asked to come in at a time when our schools were failing, and they fulfilled their obligations. So.
And are you aware of what the contract says for IDEA right now?
Yes.
What grade levels?
Through 7th grade.
Thank you. So what have we not withheld? What have we not done to hold up our part?
I'm just advocating that we approve secondary grade levels.
Okay, so you should say that rather than say we're not doing our part. I think would be more appropriate.
Well, maybe I didn't say that when I was speaking, but I believe I said that I'm asking that we approve secondary grade levels.
That's accurate. But you also said you were here not in favor of the board because they weren't approving 9th through 12th, but that's not on the agenda, nor has it been discussed publicly by this board.
I didn't say 9th through 12th. I just said secondary grade levels.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to just make a comment that, through the system of great schools that was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers, we've been on a journey with our system of great schools, and one of the things that was very important from the very beginning, the conceptual thought process of system of great schools, was that the community would define the system of great schools. We've been in it, 6 years now, and 6 years ago, prior to the Lone Star Governors, there was no mechanism, in a sense, except for the report from the state of Texas to report to the public the matters of the district and as to what point in time particular advances or no advances were being made. So today we approved new measures, percentages that we're targeting to move the district forward. So, I understand that sometimes as a speaker, there can be a lack of articulation about how the district's doing, but, it's always good to step back and holistically look at how we have proposed and agreed to some of the board members are new that have come on, but holistically, it has stayed intact. So there's been transparency provided to the public as to what measures are being taken place and where we're at. So, when I hear things about how, this school was at this or this school was at that in a sense of progress, well, I understand that. I can understand that we can historically go back and pick and choose, the problems that existed in the district.
Mr. Marquez, I don't mean to cut you off, but we are technically in the public comment portion, so if you don't mind allowing Ms. Ware to present, and then we can continue the discussion on this topic. If that's okay with you.
Sorry.
Hello again.
I'll be quiet.
So we're here to discuss item 7F, the expansion of the IDEA Travis campus. In 2019, MISD partnered with IDEA Public Schools to operate the IDEA Travis campus. The Senate Bill 1882 Partnership Agreement authorizes IDEA Public Schools to serve grades pre-kindergarten through 7th at the IDEA Travis campus. Section 1005 of the agreement provides that by mutual written agreement, operations may be expanded through grade 12. As part of this expansion for 8th grade, IDEA Public Schools will purchase and locate portable buildings on the campus in order to accommodate the additional grade level. The proposed resolution was adopted by the IDEA Public Schools Board of Directors at their meeting on March 25th. The district's administration recommends the adoption of the proposed resolution to authorize IDEA Travis to expand to serve 8th grade students beginning in the 2022-2023 school year.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the addition of 8th grade to IDEA Travis campus. Second.
I just have one comment. When we talk about this expansion, outside of the contract that we signed to 2030 with IDEA for K through 7th, that was our initial obligation. We are adding 8th grade, and it will still be a sub-C partnership. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I just wanted to clarify that piece as we look to the future. Thank you.
Mr. Marquez?
Yeah, so clarifying that if we add 8th grade, it doesn't, we're not extending any more dates, right? We're still sticking with our original timeline for.
That is correct.
Okay, well, so thank you, Mr. Pounds, for helping me along there, and I'll finish my comments here real quick. But so, as we work through these partnerships, there's been a lot of gain made. So, I would just make the holistic advice that, every partnership should be looked at yearly and have their consideration and so forth. So, I love when I follow stock. I love when I fall in love with a stock, and it doesn't work out for me, and then, I figured out that there's certain things. So there are certain things in life that take consideration every year, and I think it's the right process for the district to constantly evaluate that process as we're continuing to grow this system of great schools that I think we all agree to as a community that it would be defined eventually by the community, but it would take some time. That's all I have.
Any other comments, Mr. Bishop?
Yeah, I struggle with this, to a point of, we're under a contract from a point of going through 7th grade, and I was okay with that in the beginning. I'm still okay with it now because that's the contract that we have, and I look at the extension that they're asking for from an 8th grade standpoint, and then I go back and I think, well, what's next after this, and then what comes after whatever's coming after that. And so my stance on it for right now is I think that the new administration that we have with Dr. Ramsey and the team that she's put together. I know there's been, that I feel, from what I've seen in our data, that there's some turning in our academic scores that are coming. I know the ship wasn't turned all of a sudden. I know it's been over the years, but I think from my standpoint and where I sit, I think the turns are turning academically, and I believe that the staff that she has together, I think is going to happen with that staff. And I just believe that the contract that we have in place, I think we need to stay with that contract. And that's just my belief on where we are with the contract of staying with through the 7th grade.
Mr. Murray?
Yes, Mr. Davis.
While it is true that the contract that we initially signed only goes through 7th grade, the plan was never to discontinue IDEA if it was successful at 7th grade. The plan was, if successful, it would continue through 12th grade. I think the measure of success, I hope there will be no doubt that it's been successful when we have the early STAR results this summer. And I hope that we quickly move to reconsider the request to extend it to 12th grade once we get back those results, because I think we're going to be impressed with those results. I'm confident that we have, based on what I've seen in person at IDEA, what I've seen of people choosing to go there each and every year after they've experienced it for each of the 2 or 3 years they've been there. And the number of people on the waiting list is another indication. The hundreds of people that are on the waiting list that are saying, I want in. I want a part of this. I want to be a part of what's going on here at IDEA Travis. And so while I'm hopeful that we at least extend that opportunity that's been in demand by the members of that district, the students that attend that school, to at least do 8th grade, I hope it's only a matter of time this summer before we come back quickly and say, let's extend it to 12th grade, because they're doing what we expect them to do, and they've made a difference in the lives of Travis students. And academic achievement and performance is our North Star, and it should be in considering this decision, and one I hope that we'll make this summer.
On the same pretense, and I hear what you're saying, Mr. Davis, but also, and I won't go into any deep details on it, but also TEA has a pause on all this as well, and we'll see what they come out with their outcomes as well.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second by Mr. Davis. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. We have 4-4. All against, please raise your right hand. 3. We have a 4-3 vote. The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is item 7G, discussion and possible action to approve resolution for employee appreciation. Mr. Bailey, welcome.
Good evening, President Murray, board member, Superintendent Ramsey. This will hopefully go quickly. I think it's a good thing, and so it's exciting and it's great news, and we want to appreciate this board. Agenda item number 7G is very positive and it's exciting for our district. And in consultation with our General Counsel, Mr. Pounds, we are recommending this resolution that will provide details on how the disbursement of the employee appreciation bonus for the 2021-2022 school year will be distributed to our employees. And so this one-time bonus is intended to recognize the monumental efforts and committed service of our employees this year and throughout this pandemic. And so the resolution provides specifics on the details on how that will be dispersed.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Trischetti, a second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion?
I'd like to say, Mr. Murray, being on the Finance Committee, along with Mr. Murray and Mr. Monikis and also with Mr. Dodds and his team, Dr. Ramsey, it's always a joy when the time comes when we can show appreciation to our staff and our teachers, and also our custodial and our maintenance people, that we're able to do something to show appreciation. We always know it's never enough, but when we're able to do something like that, to show the appreciation for what y'all do for the service of our children and our district and our community, I just want to personally say thank you. Can't say thank you enough for what y'all do for educating our students. So thank you.
Mr. Chair. I would also just like to echo what Mr. Bishop said, but also say that we have heard numerous times that this has been one of the most difficult school years. And they've, for different reasons than what happened during the pandemic. And I just appreciate our staff sticking with us and being willing to put in the fight that is going to be necessary as we move forward. So just please know that it's so important and vital, and this is just a small token of appreciation, but we really appreciate it.
Amen.
And I think it said it best tonight that we had three principals speak, and all three of them mentioned the hard work of their staff and their teachers and what they put in this year, and it speaks volumes for what's going on our campuses. And Dr. Ramsey made mention of it as well, about the teachers and where this really starts at. I do, just in relation to what Mr. Garnett said earlier, I totally understand his line of thinking, but I also understand that this staff and this district service center filled in gaps when we didn't have teachers to step into classrooms, and they had to go into a classroom and teach on a daily basis. And there wasn't any of them that said, no, that's not me, I'm not doing that. They were all willing to go and do that extra step for our kids. And so I think it's important that we say thank you in the smallest possible way that we can to the work and dedication that they put in for the last 3 years. So any other discussion?
Yeah, I just want to echo just a little more on that, the fact that MISD has quite a few employees in a sense. And to me, I know there's different departments, and different sectors in there. But at the end of the day, MISD is a team. And we want to show appreciation from one end to the other. So it's a family. It's an MISD family. So we're glad and proud that this could occur and come to fruition. So thank you everyone for your hard work.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. 7-0.
Thank you, board members.
The next item on the agenda, the time is now 9:06, and the next item on the agenda is closed session in accordance with Government Code Section 551071 for the purpose of private consultation with the board's attorney on any and all subject matters authorized by law. Section 551.072 for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, and item Section 551074 for the purpose of considering the appointment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of public officers or employees to hear complaints or charges against a public officer or employee. We do expect items coming out of closed session, and we thank you for being here tonight, and hope you have a good evening. The time is now 10:16, and the board is emerging from executive session. The first item we will go back to that we held off until executive session was item 7E, discussion of possible action to approve resolution extension of First Tee lease agreement. Do I have a motion?
We'll wait for Mr. Marquez to sit down, I think. I don't know. He's coming back. No. But just to provide a little context on what we're discussing here, the First Tee lease agreement extension is for 15 years. First Tee is a program that we leased land to, and they're making improvements at no cost to the district. It's a golf program for our students, and so in order to help them secure future funding for the programs, they wanted to extend the lease, and the district administration agrees that that would be in the best interest of our students as well. So that is what is proposed in the resolution.
And Brian, I'm going to announce I'm abstaining from discussing or voting on this agenda item.
So, Mr. Davis is abstaining. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Tuschetti, a second by Mr. Marquez. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. It's 6-4 with 6-4 and with 6-4 the motion, one abstention.
Okay.
It's item 9, discussion and possible approval of employee contract renewal extensions, term probationary administrators and non-certified administrators, and authorize superintendent to issue contracts. The first item is item B, administrative non-certified term contracts.
I move to accept contracts as printed and included in the packet.
Motion by Mr. Tuschetti, a second by Mr. Bishop. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. 7-0. And the next item is term and dual contracts.
I move to accept contracts as printed and included in the packet.
Second, motion by John Tuschetti, second by Michael Booker. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. 7-0. The last item is probationary and dual contracts.
I move to accept contracts as presented and included in the packet.
Motion by Mr. Tuschetti, a second by Mr. Booker. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous, 7-0. Thank you. The time is now 10:19, and we are adjourned. Thank you.